Chapter 249. The aroma of the chicken mixed with that of the mushrooms. The tantalizing aroma made one salivate uncontrollably. The combination of the golden chicken and the shiitake mushrooms was so tantalizing. This meat. Julian furrowed his brows. He was still a little cautious when it came to meat. Although he had eaten a lot of meat in the restaurant, he had never tried chicken. After a moment of hesitation, he picked up his chopsticks and put a piece into his mouth. The delicious chicken soup wrapped around the tender chicken. The flavor exploded in his mouth. The chicken didn't have the slightest bit of rank odor. Its freshness was enhanced to the extreme by the aroma of the mushrooms. The cooking temperature was just right. The chicken was at its most tender and refreshing when it was taken out of the pot. It was a little less hard and a little more dry. The feeling of biting the chicken with his teeth was so wonderful. The delicious and thick chicken soup made him sink into it. The delicious taste danced on the tip of his tongue. He was only willing to swallow it after chewing it carefully. A warm feeling flowed from the top to the bottom of his legs. The heat in his body seemed to have increased slightly. This is... Julian's eyes lit up. The Ruggiamo from before had some effect on dispelling the chill. He didn't expect the braised chicken to be even more effective. Although it only increased his heat, it was already very rare for someone like him who usually felt cold all over. Is chicken always this delicious? Julian couldn't help but put another piece into his mouth. It had been a few decades, and he had completely forgotten the taste of chicken. However, he was sure that the chicken he had eaten in the past definitely wasn't this delicious. How could he forget such a wonderful taste? After eating 2 pieces of chicken, Julian took a bite of rice. The rice was fragrant and delicious, and the more he chewed, the sweeter it became. It was a perfect match for the delicious chicken. 1 bite of chicken, 1 bite of rice, and some side dishes. It was so delicious that he couldn't stop eating. Is it really that delicious? Even the damned old man who doesn't like to eat meat is eating it with such relish. Crassus glanced at Julian, who couldn't stop eating. He also picked up his chopsticks and put a shiitake mushroom into his mouth. The shiitake mushroom had absorbed the delicious chicken soup. With a light bite, the chicken soup overflowed. He felt as if he had fallen into a pond filled with rich chicken soup. The wonderful taste made every cell in his body feel as if they had been opened, and he was cheering in joy. What delicious mushrooms! This chicken soup is simply amazing. Crassus couldn't help but praise. He immediately picked up a piece of chicken and put it into his mouth. He enjoyed the delicious taste melting in his mouth. His eyes couldn't help but narrow, and his face was full of happiness and joy. Masters, let me tell you a little secret. If you pour chicken soup into rice, it will taste even better. I don't usually tell people. Amy looked back at the 2 of them and said softly. Really? Crassus and Urian were skeptical, but since it was Amy who said so, they picked up their spoons at the same time and poured the soup on the rice. After the soup was evenly absorbed by the rice, they scooped a spoonful of rice and put it into their mouths. N. T. A. The. L. The delicious it. One came the delicious taste. It to say it. The was with it. Mr. Mac, give me another bowl of rice. Crassus and Julian put down their empty bowls at the same time. They looked at Meg and said, Okay. Meg picked up the 2 bowls with a smile and walked into the kitchen. Host, the system recommends that you charge as usual. Reject this unreasonable request. 1 braised chicken with 1 bowl of rice. This will help increase sales. The system's voice sounded. System, do you have friends? Meg asked calmly as he scooped rice. The system doesn't need friends. If I did, I believe many people would be willing to be my friend, the system said confidently. No, normal people won't be friends with a stingy person like you. Don't tell people I'm your friend in the future. Meg pursed his lips and turned off the rice cooker. He continued, also, it's normal for customers to ask for more rice. Which braised chicken and rice restaurant doesn't allow customers to ask for more rice? It's okay to make money, but don't think about money. That will greatly reduce the customer's dining experience. Correct the host's mistake. Money doesn't have eyes in this world, the system said seriously. Alright, give me the price. All the ingredients today will be on me. I'm the one who caught the drumsticks, Meg said directly. He couldn't be bothered to argue with the system. The price of a braised chicken is as follows: 2 agarwood mushrooms, 100 copper coins, 1/4 sweet potato, 10 copper coins, 1/8 of alpine lettuce, 10 copper coins, 1/8 of a volcanic island fiery chicken drumstick, 100 copper coins, 1 bowl of moonlight fragrant rice, 25 copper coins. The total cost is 400 copper coins. Can't it be cheaper? It's not easy for me to set the price like this. Although the price was already very fair given the quality of the ingredients provided by the system, Meg still tried to ask. The price of the ingredients is provided to the host at a 50% discount after careful market research by the system. There's no bargaining. The system's reply didn't have the slightest intention of negotiating. Alright, it's settled then. Meg raised an eyebrow. The cost of the ingredients was 400 copper coins, so it shouldn't be a problem to set the price at 800 copper coins per serving. If he added rice, it would be 50 copper coins per bowl. Julian took the second bowl of rice, hesitated for a moment, and poured it all into the earthenware bowl. Then, he picked up a spoon and ate happily. Crassus stretched his neck to take a look, then poured it into the bowl as well. His face was full of happiness and joy. Burp, the two put down their spoons at almost the same time, then burped with satisfaction. Mr. Mac, I think the day off you took was totally worth it. This new dish will definitely sell well. Crassus gave Meg a big thumbs up, but then he looked at Amy and shook his head. But in the future, don't casually ask for leave for little Amy during class time. It's easy to delay her learning progress. What's wrong with asking for leave? Learning is about balancing work and rest. A magician who stays in the magic room all day will only become a magic nerd, Julian said disapprovingly, pursing his lips. The two stared at each other. Ice and fire seemed to be clashing in an instant, and the atmosphere was slowly rising. Chapter 250. If I'm going to give it to Amy, of course it's going to be a magic caster's staff that can smash dragons and summon fireballs. Crassus said with a serious expression. Bullshit. Magic wands have to be small and elegant, and can be easily tucked away in one sleeve. That's the standard for magic casters. Are you afraid that people won't know that you have a leg injury? Julian pursed his lips, and his hoarse voice raised a few octaves to express his displeasure. If you let a goblin get close to you with that chopstick of yours, I'm afraid you won't be able to defeat it, Crassus sneered as he looked at Julian. You're the only one who can get close to a goblin with that kind of thing. As a magic caster, you have to jump up and down like a monkey in a fight. That's an insult to magic casters. You're a disgrace to the magic world. Julian retorted mercilessly. Humph. The two of them glared at each other and harumphed coldly at the same time. Their auras were still rising steadily, and sparks seemed to fly as their gazes met. It was as if they were going to start a fight at any moment. The atmosphere in the restaurant suddenly became tense, and even Sally stopped in her tracks as she looked on with a hint of apprehension in her eyes. Meg looked on from the side with a hint of concern. After all, If two great magic casters were to fight, the system's level 3 defense system wouldn't be able to stop them at all. When his gaze fell on Amy, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. His daughter really wasn't afraid of things getting out of hand. Masters, you're not allowed to fight in the restaurant. If you fight, Amy will get angry, and if she gets angry, she'll ignore you, Amy said with a serious expression. Crassus withdrew his aura first, and looked at Amy with a smile as he said, "Little Amy, look at how beautiful my magic caster's staff is. If you want it, I can make a bluish-purple magic caster's staff for you using purplish-blue gold, and put a 9th tier purple-eyed beast's beast crystal on it. It's all so purple. It's all purple. Amy loves purple." Amy's eyes immediately lit up. "Little Amy, look at how small and adorable this magic caster's staff is. It can be shrunk, so it's not heavy at all. You can put it in your pocket, and it won't get in the way when you're playing with other kids. Otherwise, how are you going to play with a magic caster's staff?" Urian pulled out a black wand that was around 10 centimeters in length from his sleeve. He twirled it around, and it immediately sprung into 2 halves, transforming into a wand that was around 30 centimeters in length. He then pressed the wand back again, and it reverted back to its original size. "Wow, this is great too. I also like to play with children. I don't want to carry a big stick around all the time." Amy looked at the little wand in Urian's hand, and stars were already beginning to appear in her eyes. "That's right. This is the kind of wand that little girls should be using. You'll be able to turn it into a wand with a simple wave of your hand. All of the other kids will be very envious of you." Urian nodded with a confident smile. "You came prepared. Shameless." Crassus stared at the shrunk magic caster's staff in Julian's hand, and he was starting to get a little anxious. It was most likely impossible to convince Julian in a short time, so he had no choice but to target Amy. However, magic caster's staffs were only that long, and it was best to make them solid. That way, they could ensure that the magic caster's staff wouldn't break during melee combat. Amy stared at the magic caster's staff in Julian's hand for a while before shaking her head. "But it's not going to work if it's too small. If I learn Master Halfbeard's magic and use such a small magic caster to bash a giant dragon's head, it won't hurt at all." "Then what do you want?" Crassus and Julian asked in unison. Both of them wore conflicted expressions. Their precious disciple's request was really difficult to satisfy. She wanted something small and delicate, yet big and small enough to bash a giant dragon. How was that possible? "I want it to be only as long as my palm when it's small, and as tall as me when it's big. It would be best if it could also transform into a long sword, and when it wants to fly, it could transform into a broom," Amy said with a serious expression. She paused momentarily before nodding. "That's all I want. That's all." Julian and Crassus' expressions immediately became a little peculiar. How was a palm-sized magic caster going to be able to do so many things? That was still a small request. She was going to drive their master to his grave. "Master, is it super simple?" Amy looked at the two of them expectantly and asked. The two of them hesitated momentarily at the sight of Amy's expectant gaze before nodding in unison. "Yes, it's quite simple." "Then can you really make it for Amy?" "It's a purple one, a super beautiful purple one," Amy said happily. "I can understand the first 2 points, but why do you have to hide a sword in the staff? And why do you have to transform it into a broom when you want to fly?" Crassus asked with a perplexed expression as he looked at Amy. Meg raised an eyebrow. He naturally knew why Amy had made such a request, but he didn't expect her to say it in front of Crassus and Julian. If they knew that he wanted to teach Amy swordsmanship, then he would be exposed. Because that way, Amy can pretend to be a female knight. They definitely won't be able to guess that I'm actually a magic caster. And don't all witches have brooms? I saw them painted on the walls outside the school building. Amy nodded earnestly. Crassus and Julian were both speechless. Do you really have to have both? Crassus asked again. If I can only choose one, then I don't want the broom. Amy hesitated for a moment before reluctantly giving up. Wand, staff, long sword. 3 completely different things had to be combined into a palm-sized staff. Crassus and Julian both fell silent and fell into deep thought. Master, you can't make it. Amy stood quietly for a while. Even though she was a little disappointed, she still consoled, that's all right, then Amy only needs a normal wand. Crassus stood up, and looked at Amy with a serious expression as he said, who said that? I'll definitely make a satisfactory staff for Amy. Julian also stood up and nodded solemnly. Don't worry, I'll leave it to you, Master. Yes, I believe in you, Master. Master is the best. Amy's eyes lit up again. She clasped the items in her hands and said, then this big pig's tooth and purple eagle's eye, you can keep it for fun. The materials of 2nd and 3rd tier magic beasts are too inferior. They're more suitable for toys. I'll go back and do some research. Crassus shook his head with a smile, and turned to leave. I'll go do some research too, Julian also said, and got up to follow Crassus out. Goodbye, Master Halfbeard, Master Turtle, Amy said to the 2 of them. Chapter 251. There's no way we're going to work together, not in this lifetime. Julian's voice was very resolute. He took a couple of steps forward before turning back to Crassus, and said, you can provide the materials for the staff, but I'll make the wand. That's not an issue. However, if we want to solve the problem of spatial scaling, we'll have to ask Novan for help. He's the most proficient in spatial magic, and we'll have to put a sword in the staff. Crassus followed along with Julian, and the 2 of them walked side by side. In order to create a weapon that combined a wand, a staff, and a long sword, they were working together for the first time in their lives. If other magic casters on the continent were to see this, they would most likely be shocked out of their wits. At the entrance of the restaurant, Amy turned to Meg with an expectant look in her eyes, and asked, Father, can they really make it? Seeing as they say they can, then there should be no issues. Meg looked on as Crassus and Julian walked into the magic potion shop, and nodded with a smile. He was looking forward to seeing what kind of wand these 2 magic casters would be able to create. That's strange. Why isn't the blacksmith shop in Mumbai open today? Meg looked at the blacksmith shop with its doors tightly shut. No wonder he didn't come out even though there was such a huge commotion. The onlookers on the streets had already dispersed, but the discussion about the incident at Mamie restaurant was still ongoing. Regardless of whether someone had died, or all the troublemakers had been arrested while Mamie restaurant was completely unscathed, there were many versions of the story that had been spread among the crowd. Amy's is not to be messed with. However, everyone came to the same conclusion in the end. Someone had identified the 2 fatties who had been taken away. They were board members of the Aden Chamber of Commerce, and they were quite influential figures in Chaos City. Yabamiya set up all of the tables and chairs as he turned to Meg, and asked, Boss, the tables and chairs are all ready. They're really good quality, and they're not damaged at all. It's just that they're missing a door. Do you need me to get a carpenter for you? The sawdust on the ground had also been cleaned up by Sally using magic. Aside from the fact that there was a door missing, the restaurant wasn't damaged at all. Meg looked at the 2 of them with a smile, and said, Leave that to me. You can go back now. Just treat it as a vacation, and be at the restaurant before 7 a.m. tomorrow. You must have been scared by what happened today. How could that be? Boss and Amy caught the serial killer. You're heroes. Even the Grey Temple wants to reward you. Yabamiya looked at Meg and Amy with admiration in his eyes. He then lowered his head in dejection and said, "If I were you, I would have been so scared that I wouldn't know what to do. That man was so scary, and he even had a sword. Mia, you're very strong, and your bone structure and dexterity are also very high. If you practice swordsmanship, you'll improve very quickly. You'll be able to defeat that guy in about half a year," Sally said to the dejected Yabamiya. "Really?" Yabamiya stared at Sally with incredulity in her eyes. Meg also re-evaluated Yabamiya upon hearing that. Yabamiya was a little thin, but his strength was comparable to that of a first-tier knight. After unleashing his dragon tail, he could very well reach the standard of a second-tier knight. With such strength, he would have an innate advantage in swordsmanship, especially when it came to heavy swords. The weight of the sword in his hands was completely incomparable to that of a beginner. Just as Sally had said, Yabamiya was indeed a good candidate for swordsmanship. Even if he started now, he might be able to achieve great things. "Of course it's true." Sally nodded earnestly. "But, even if I want to practice swordsmanship, no one will teach me." Yabamiya shook his head, but he didn't seem too dejected. Instead, a smile appeared on his face, and he said, "Besides, I like working in the restaurant. If I have to give up my job to practice swordsmanship, then I'd rather not practice swordsmanship. Yes, I also think that working in the restaurant is better." Sally nodded in agreement. Meg looked at Mia and Sally. He didn't think that the two of them would place so much importance on working in the restaurant. However, he wasn't in a hurry to teach Yabamiya swordsmanship. Even though he felt that this girl was very good, it would be very easy for his identity to be exposed if he taught her swordsmanship. After all, she wasn't Amy. "All right, boss, we're going back now. See you tomorrow." "Bye, Amy." Yabamiya scanned the restaurant, and after making sure that there was nothing left to clean up, he waved at Meg and Amy. "Bye," Sally also said to the two of them. "Bye." Meg nodded. "Bye, big sister Mia, big sister Sally. Come back tomorrow and dance. Spring is here again." Amy waved at the two of them in an enthusiastic manner. After watching the two of them leave, Meg looked at Amy, who was yawning, and Ugly Duckling, who was lying on the ground and looking at him pitifully. He asked with a smile, "Ugly Duckling, are you full?" "Meow, meow." Ugly Duckling shook its head immediately and looked at Amy as if complaining. "I think it's already full," Amy said hesitantly. "Meow." Ugly Duckling shook its head vigorously to express its objection. "Then eat a little more. Ugly Duckling is still growing. It can't be hungry." Meg looked at Ugly Duckling's pitiful look, and couldn't bear to see it like this. After all, most of the dried fish had been eaten by Amy, and it had run out to play in the morning. It was probably hungry now. "All right, then I'll have to add 5 more laps to the evening run." Amy shrugged her little shoulders with a hint of resignation in her voice. "Meow." Ugly Duckling lay on the ground weakly and gave up completely. Meg brought Amy and Ugly Duckling upstairs, and gave Ugly Duckling 2 small fishes to eat. Then, he coaxed the 2 little fellows to sleep before going downstairs. Meg walked to the door and looked left and right to make sure that no one was paying attention to them. He directly said in his mind, "System, install the door. Installation fee, 1 gold coin." The system's voice sounded. "Holy shit. Don't all the doors come with installation services?" Meg raised his eyebrows. Although he knew that the system was a scammer, he didn't expect it to be so good at charging twice. After a round of brutal haggling, Meg successfully got the system to install the door at the installation fee of 10 copper coins. This could be considered another peak of his haggling. Meg looked at the door that was exactly the same as the original wooden door. After opening and closing it, and making sure that the installation was good, he was about to close and lock the door. Chapter 252. Eden Square Delicious Cuisine Rankings. Meg opened the door and looked at the two middle-aged men in red vests. He shook his head and said, "Not interested." Then he closed the door. Alvin and Luther looked at each other in surprise. Generally, newly opened restaurants were very enthusiastic about things like the Eden Cuisine Rankings. After all, as long as they entered the top 100, it was equivalent to having an additional advertising opportunity for all diners. That was something that could directly increase their turnover. Of course, it was basically impossible for a new restaurant to enter the top 100, but there had never been a boss who refused without even thinking. "Luther, let's go." It seems that the owner is quite self-aware. If a restaurant that has only been open for a dozen days can make it onto the list, some people will doubt the authority of our gourmet cuisine ranking, Alvin said unhappily as he closed the book in his hand. "I don't think any restaurant in the Eden Square would use such a large piece of crystal as a decoration. Maybe they have a lot of money." Luther pointed at the floor-to-ceiling glass with a surprised expression. Meg was indeed not interested in the so-called gourmet rankings. These things had always been prepared for those customers who did not have their own opinions and wanted to find their own delicacies. Moreover, the restaurants on the rankings were usually not the ones with the best and most unique tastes, but the ones with the highest prices and the highest number of customers. This was because only they could have a large number of votes. The real delicacies were often hidden in the restaurants in the middle and lower reaches. Some restaurants would not even appear on the list. They were hidden in some corner of the city, waiting for customers to discover them. Of course, the most important thing was that Meg no longer had to worry about the source of customers. Instead of welcoming a large wave of sightseeing customers every day because of his ranking, he preferred to receive familiar faces with spending power every day. After all, he could only provide so much food every day. Why would he need so much attention? Ding! New mission issued by the system. Host, please place a dish in the top 30 of this month's Eden Square Delicious Cuisine Rankings. Mission reward, 1 Haagen-Dazs ice cream set recipe. Mission failure penalty, a fine of 10,000 gold coins. At this moment, the system's voice suddenly sounded. "Wait a minute, system. What did you just say about the punishment for failing the quest?" Meg's footsteps came to a halt. He felt as if he had misheard something. Mission failure penalty, a fine of 10,000 gold coins. The system repeated. What the fuck? System, although I know you like money, can you not make it so obvious? What kind of system gives you a fine for failing a mission? Meg couldn't help but roar in his heart. However, he still opened the door. With an awkward expression, he said to the two men who were about to turn around and leave, "Wait a minute, I thought about it. I'm still a little interested." Alvin and Luther turned around and looked at Meg in confusion. "Boss, are you saying that you're going to participate in the Eden Square food competition?" Luther asked. "Yes, do we need to do anything?" Meg smiled and nodded, cursing in his heart. Poverty was indeed a sin. For 10,000 gold coins, he had no choice but to lower his head to the system. Of course, Meg was also a little tempted by the Haagen-Dazs ice cream set. It was the favorite of children, and Amy would definitely like it. She would definitely look adorable when she saw the little one eating ice cream. It should be a piece of cake for me to get into the top 30, right? Meg was also very confident. He didn't believe that there was anyone in the Eden Square who could cook better food than him. Not to mention the top 30, he was confident that he could get into the top 3. The two men were both of medium build and around 40 years of age. Their bellies were bulging, indicating that they ate a lot. The red vests they were wearing had a pot and a spoon embroidered on the chest, and the words, Aden Square Catering Association, embroidered on the back. The man on the left was carrying a cloth bag. If you want to participate, you'll have to pay a registration fee of 5 gold coins. Then, we'll add your restaurant to the preliminary list. Starting tomorrow, customers will vote using small ballots for 10 days. In the end, the top 100 restaurants with the highest scores and votes will be selected for this month's rankings. Alvin looked up at the name of the restaurant before writing it down in his notebook. He then extended a hand to Meg in a very natural manner. That's it. Meg wasn't in a hurry to pay. 5 gold coins for just writing down the name of a restaurant was a little too much. Of course not, but the rest of the process will have to wait until the registration fee is collected, Luther said with a smile. 5 gold coins. Meg hesitated for a moment before taking out 5 gold coins from his pocket and handing them to Arvin. It seemed that they were very familiar with this process. They held it once a month, so they could earn a lot of money just from the registration fee alone. Very good. This is a special voting ticket. Boss, after you pay the bill, you can give this ticket to the customers. With this ticket, the customers can evaluate and vote on the delicacies of the restaurant. The final voting result will be based on the evaluation of all the customers who have entered and spent in the restaurant. Then, the number of customers and the amount of money spent will be combined to give a final cumulative score. Luther pulled out 2 stacks of 5 cm wide and 10 cm long cards from the cloth bag in his hand. At the same time, he extended his other hand to Meg with a smile, and said, "These are ticket papers with the association's special magic anti-counterfeiting symbol. 100 of them per stack, and 1 gold coin per stack. How many stacks do you need, boss?" Fuck. There must be a chain of interests behind this. If 1 ticket paper costs 1 copper coin, wouldn't those restaurants with high traffic spend tens of thousands on tickets? This doesn't even include the cost of finding sponsors. I don't think it's possible to get into the top 10 without at least 100,000 or 200,000, right? Meg raised his eyebrows. It seemed that he had thought of the problem too simply, and the otherworldly merchants were too simple-minded. They were even better at this kind of trick. How many tickets do you need to get into the top 30? Meg asked tentatively. Top 30. That's hard to say. If the restaurant's dishes are more expensive, 2,000 or 3,000 tickets would be enough. If it's like the green onion pancakes that cost 5 copper coins per serving, it would be difficult to get into the top 100 even with 10,000 tickets. But if it's your restaurant, I suggest you buy fewer tickets. It would be a waste to use them all up. Luther turned to Mag with a hint of surprise on his face. He didn't think that his father, who was still so young, would be interested in the top 30 of the rankings board once he became interested in it. One had to know that the top 30 restaurants this month were all at least 3 years old, and they were all quite large. Most of them even had the Aden Chamber of Commerce's emblem hanging on their doors. It was simply a fool's dream for a newly opened restaurant to want to get a share of the profits. Chapter 253. 2,000 tickets. Luther turned to Meg with a surprised look on his face. 2,000 tickets wasn't a lot compared to the tens of thousands of tickets that a typical restaurant would require, but for a restaurant that had only recently opened, 2,000 tickets was a little excessive. That's right. Meg nodded. If the votes were related to how much the customer spent, then he was very confident again. There was probably no restaurant in the Aden Square whose prices were higher than his. Judging by the number of customers who came in every day, 2,000 tickets would probably only last him for a few days. Spending a few thousand to get a Haagen-Dazs recipe was definitely worth it. As the representative of high-end ice cream, Meg was actually quite fond of it himself. He didn't think that the system would give him this as a reward. Luther looked at Meg with a serious expression, and said, then I have to tell you that these tickets are non-refundable, and they'll become invalid after the expiration date. The magic anti-counterfeiting symbol on the tickets only lasts for 15 days, but if you don't have enough tickets, you can buy more at the voting booth. No problem. Come on in, I'll go get the money. Meg nodded before entering the restaurant. I didn't think that the owner would be so rich, but he's not very smart. Alvin chuckled. Shoo, don't let them hear us. But since it's like this, we've completed our mission for today. There are exactly 2,000 tickets left in the bag. We've emptied them all at once. Luther's expression was also somewhat excited as he pushed open the door and entered the restaurant. Wow! Both of their eyes widened as soon as they entered the restaurant. There were 2 luxurious crystal chandeliers in the restaurant, and the warm yellow lights were very comfortable to look at. The 16 wooden tables were arranged in an orderly manner, and the colors and patterns on the tables and chairs were all the same, creating a very comfortable and harmonious atmosphere. Even though they couldn't understand the illustrations on the walls, the decorations hanging on the walls were quite eye-catching. The 2 of them had been selling tickets at all of the restaurants in the Aden Square for years, so they were quite discerning. They had seen plenty of luxurious restaurants and restaurants that were hundreds of square meters in size, but this was the first time they had seen a restaurant that looked so comfortable and luxurious. If they had to choose, they would rather have a meal here than those luxurious restaurants that were almost blinding and those big restaurants that could seat hundreds of people. This restaurant will definitely become popular. This was the first thought that came to their minds. 2 dragon coins. Meg took the money from the counter and handed it to Luther. All right, a restaurant can recommend a maximum of 5 dishes to compete for the rankings. Customers can also write down 5 dishes in a single vote. You can choose 5 dishes from the restaurant's menu, and we will record them for voting, Luther said to Meg after receiving the money. 5. Meg's expression suddenly became awkward. Boss, just choose the 5 best-selling dishes in your restaurant. Generally speaking, these are the easiest ones to get on the list. Alvin said with a smile. They had seen this kind of situation many times. Many bosses were struggling with which dishes to put on the table. System, help me put the braised chicken and rice on the menu. The price is 800 copper coins, and the rice is 50 copper coins per bowl. Meg said in his heart. He was not conflicted about which dish to choose, but there were too few dishes on the menu. He could not even get 5 dishes. Ding! Writing complete. 20 copper coins have been deducted, the system's voice sounded. Then you guys can copy according to the menu. The sweet tofu pudding counts as 1 dish, and the savory one counts as 1 dish. That'll make it 5 dishes. Meg picked up a menu from a nearby table and handed it to Luther. There are only 4 dishes. Luther couldn't help but exclaim as he scanned the menu. This price. Boss, you didn't write it wrong, did you? Alvin also leaned over to take a look, and his eyes immediately widened. Even the cheapest dish on the menu cost 200 copper coins, and the most expensive, the braised chicken and rice, cost 800 copper coins per bowl, and the rice was 50 copper coins per bowl. They had scoured the entire Aden Square, but had rarely seen such a price. Even the Dukas restaurant, which was ranked number 1 on the Aden Square food rankings, was only selling its roast lamb for 2,500 copper coins, and that was only enough for 3 servings of braised chicken and rice. What kind of absurd price was this? The same thought flashed through Luther's and Alvin's minds at the same time. Just a moment ago, they thought that this restaurant style made it unreasonable for it to not become popular, but with such a high price, it would be a miracle if it could become popular. Just write according to the menu. Meg didn't bother to explain, and nodded as he gestured for them to copy the menu. All right. Luther couldn't be bothered to say anything more. He took out a small notebook and copied down the prices of the dishes one by one. When he reached the braised tofu pudding, he asked, "Boss, are you really going to split this dish into 2 dishes?" "Yes, then just write down the sweet tofu pudding and the savory tofu pudding." Meg nodded with a smile. This really wasn't a single dish. "All right, then we'll put up these 5 dishes for you when the time comes." Luther nodded, and closed the notebook. He took out all the tickets from the bag and piled them on the table. After bidding farewell to Meg, he left. "This boss is rich, but I don't think he's very smart," Alvin said softly as he looked back at the restaurant. "I agree with you this time." Luther nodded. A normal boss wouldn't set such a high price when the restaurant had just opened, right? As for the 2,000 tickets, Luther thought that it would be a good thing if Meg could use 10 of them. If there were no customers to vote, it would be embarrassing for the restaurant to be at the bottom of the hundreds of restaurants. These 2,000 tickets will probably only last for 3 or 4 days. I'll have to buy more when the time comes. This catering association really is a blood-sucking parasite. Meg picked up a ticket and looked at it, and his heart ached for his money. If Sally officially joined the restaurant tomorrow, the restaurant would be able to provide over 100 plates of Yangzhou fried rice, over 600 rujiamos, 900 plates of tofu pudding, and an unknown amount of braised chicken and rice. Although many of the dishes would be repeated purchases, there should be close to 1,000 customers a day. This was the benefit of increasing his physical fitness. Before he recovered, he wouldn't be able to cook so much food even if he worked himself to death. With the increase in his physical fitness, his cooking efficiency should continue to increase. However, at that time, he would have to consider the problem of expanding the restaurant. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a place for the customers to sit. "System, we don't have to worry about customers anymore. Why are you still giving out such useless missions?" Meg asked in his mind, perplexed. "Host, as a candidate for the god of cookery, how can you be satisfied with the status quo? Conquer the Aden Square with food. Conquer the Norland continent. Conquer this world. This is the ambition and confidence that a god of cookery should have." The system's impassioned voice sounded. Chapter 254. "My lord, from what I've seen in the past 2 days, Miss Sally should have become a waitress in that restaurant. She's still staying in this inn and working 2 jobs." In an alley outside Gaia Hotel, a young elf wrapped in a black robe said softly. "Yes." Ingve nodded as he looked in the direction of Gaia Hotel. After a brief silence, he asked, "Have you done a background check on the hotel and restaurant?" "The hotel is owned by a woman, and she's been running it for over a decade. Her husband disappeared during a mercenary mission 10 years ago, and he's most likely dead. The restaurant has only been open for less than a month, so there's very little information about it. The owner is a human, and there's a half-dragon waitress in the restaurant. However, he has a half-elf daughter, and she's been taken in as a disciple by 2 great magic casters. She seems to be very talented in magic," the young elf replied. "Very talented half-elf?" Ingve raised an eyebrow as he turned to the young elf, and asked, "Which 2 great magic casters took her in as a disciple?" "Fire Lord Crassus and Frost Lord Julian," the half-elf hurriedly replied. How is that possible?" Ingve's eyes widened. As a 7th-tier magic caster, even though he was several hundred years older than Crassus and Julian, he was still considered to be at the pinnacle of the magic world. The battle between ice and fire had been going on for close to 100 years, and the outcome had yet to be decided. Now, they had taken in the same disciple. The last person they had begged to take in as a disciple was Princess Irina. She had become a 10th-tier magic caster at the age of 26, which was a testament to Krasu and Urian's foresight. Now, they were fighting to take in this half-elf girl as their disciple. How terrifying was her magic talent! Where's the restaurant? Ingve asked. The elf had never seen such an expression on Ingve's face before, and he hurriedly replied, "It's on the westernmost side of the Aiden Square. It's that restaurant in the corner." Ingve's expression returned to normal, and he said with a serious expression, "Continue to keep an eye on Miss Sally and ensure her safety, but don't let her discover your existence. If she discovers you, run away immediately. Don't get involved with her." "Yes." The elf hurriedly nodded before drawing a circle with his wand under his black robe. A burst of green light erupted from his body, and he disappeared on the spot, completely concealing himself. "Third young master has already gotten up. He should be here in a few days." Ingve took another look at the direction of the hotel before turning around and leaving. Meg agreed that a man with good cooking skills could conquer a woman's stomach. However, Meg felt that it was a bit far-fetched to say that a chef could conquer the world with food alone. "System, did you lower the IQ of this world?" Meg tried asking. "The system doesn't have the authority to do that. Even the heavenly Tao can't do that. Lowering the IQ of this world is an irreversible action. Once the IQ of this world is lowered, those with low IQ will become mentally retarded. Furthermore, once the IQ of this world is out of balance, the world will be unable to continue functioning, and the world will collapse." The system replied with a serious expression. "If you didn't lower the IQ of this world, then why did you give me such a completely illogical goal?" Meg pursed his lips and said, "Perhaps you can change it to conquering this world's stomach. Food is the most important thing to people. Host, if you can conquer this world's stomach, then theoretically speaking, you'll be their heavenly Tao." The system's voice was still impassioned. "System. Did you read a pirated dictionary of idioms? The food here refers to food that can fill one's stomach, not delicious food. After 100 years of peaceful development on the Norland continent, there aren't many people left who can't fill their stomachs. Besides, they can't afford to eat restaurant food." Meg couldn't help but chuckle. "Even so, as a candidate for the god of cookery, how can you go far on the path of becoming the god of cookery if you don't have lofty ideals and ambitions? So, young man, conquer this world's stomach." The system's attempt to twist the idiom had failed, but it still refused to give up. "I've been away for half my life, and I'm already a middle-aged man when I come back. Don't pretend to be a young man." Meg pursed his lips and locked the restaurant's door. However, after being fooled by the system, his originally calm heart really was stirred up a little. Conquering the world was a little difficult, but conquering this world's stomach did seem to be an interesting thing. Giant dragons went crazy over delicious food, elves fell in love with skewers, demons lined up to munch on rugiamos, and more interesting customers came to his door to be conquered by delicious food. Just the thought of it was interesting. Haagen-Dazs ice cream set meal. Have I ever complained about this before? I don't recall ever complaining about it. Meg went into the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. His brows furrowed as he thought for a while, but he really couldn't remember if he had complained about it before. He didn't know what the system would ask for. Just as Meg was about to go upstairs for a nap, someone knocked on the door. "Is anyone home?" "The restaurant is closed for the day," Meg said. He wasn't going to open the door. "Mr. Mack, is it?" "I'm Hader, the vice principal of the Chaos School's School of Mechanical Engineering. I'm not here to eat, I have something to ask you," the voice quickly said. "What can I do for you, Principal Hader?" Meg opened the door with a glass of water in one hand. He was surprised to see a half-bald Hader with a black briefcase under his arm. Meg had a good memory. He naturally remembered that when he was taking Amy to class 2 days ago, this vice principal of the School of Mechanical Engineering, who looked like a research-oriented scholar, had studied his bicycle and invited him to his office for a chat. However, he had refused, saying that he had to go back to cook. He didn't expect that he would come to him himself today. Heidel turned to Mag with a smile and said, "It's like this. When I saw your bicycle the other day, I couldn't help but be struck by a sense of awe. We've been researching a steam-powered device for the past few years, but we've run into a bottleneck. Would you be willing to share some ideas with us?" Steam engine. Meg raised an eyebrow as he looked at Hader with surprise. This world was still in the era of manual factories that relied on human and animal labor, and industrial development was still in the embryonic stage. However, if the steam engine was invented and used in daily life, there would soon be an industrial revolution, and the entire world would officially enter the age of steam. Chapter 255. Hader walked into the dining room. His eyes lit up when he saw the luxurious dining room, but he didn't pay much attention to it. He turned to look at Meg with a smile and said, "Mr. Mack, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. Please have a seat. I'm actually quite interested in these things." Meg smiled and put the glass of water in his hand on the table beside him. He went into the kitchen and poured another glass of water. He gently placed it in front of Hader, who had just sat down, and pulled out a chair to sit in front of him. When it came to steam engines, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Mag knew them like the back of his hand. After all, he had completed an improved design for a two-stroke reciprocating piston internal combustion engine on his own for his graduation project. Although this improvement proved to be difficult to put into practical use in the final experiment, it was theoretically able to increase the thermal efficiency by 3%. With this thesis, he had obtained a limited number of outstanding graduate positions. This was the only thing he did seriously in his 4 years of university. During this process, he also studied the steam engine, the internal combustion engine, and the steam turbine. He still remembered the structure and principle of all of them clearly. He even remembered a few classic parts and models. Of course, it was unrealistic for him to make these things with his own hands, but if he was asked to draw a few drawings and explain the principles, there would be no problem at all. To put it simply, as long as he was given a good blacksmith who could make standard parts, he could make a steam engine by himself and kick the world into the age of steam. However, Mag didn't have much interest in doing so. Regardless of whether it was Thomas Saville or Thomas Newcomen, who had invented the steam engine, or Watt, who had improved the steam engine, all of them had only left their names in the history of the steam engine. Mag wasn't very interested in leaving his name in history, but he was very curious about the level of machinery in this world. "Thank you." Hader put the glass aside and opened the cloth bag beside him. He took out a few drawings and put them on the table. He looked at Meg with a serious expression and said, "It's like this. We have been studying how to convert steam into kinetic energy, and then use it in production and life to replace animal power and improve production efficiency. And now, we have successfully converted it into kinetic energy. Although the output is still not stable, we already have an idea of how to stabilize it. Now, the problem that needs to be solved is how to transfer this energy to other objects and make this energy useful." Very bold and interesting idea. Mag looked at the crude blueprints on the table, and his eyes lit up as he looked at Heidel with a hint of respect in his eyes. In contrast with him, Heidel didn't have a giant's shoulder to stand on. It was already an extremely brilliant idea for him to be able to come up with the idea of using steam, and the fact that he had persisted in doing so was an admirable feat. Meg admired those scientists who immersed themselves in scientific research and inventions. Their whimsical ideas and years or even a lifetime of research constantly pushed human society forward. From the Industrial Revolution to the modern world, it only took a short 200 years. It could be said that the steam engine opened the curtain of this great era and accelerated the development of human society. And the man in front of him had almost achieved this. The thin charcoal drawings were a little rough, but the overall structure was very clear. It was a single-cylinder design. Steam would push the piston in the cylinder, and then external cooling would create a low-pressure state in the cylinder and push the piston back, forming a reciprocating motion. The connecting rod connected to the piston could obtain a certain amount of kinetic energy. This steam engine model was very similar to Newcomen's steam engine. As Hayter said, they had successfully turned steam into kinetic energy. However, they were still about a watt away from using this kinetic energy in production and life. But to be able to achieve this from scratch, Meg was very impressed with Hayter and his team. After all, in this world of swords and magic, people still worshipped knights who could ride on griffins and soar into the sky. Mechanics could be said to be a new and unpopular profession. If people were to tell people that one day, ordinary people could also fly into the sky and be even faster than leopards on land, they would probably only think of them as lunatics. Thank you. Hayter looked at Meg with some gratitude. He saw agreement in Meg's eyes and words. Unlike the perfunctory expression of ordinary people, and even the undisguised mockery, Hayter had experienced many of these things in the past 20 years. From a head of thick black hair to a bald head, no one knew what kind of pressure he and his team had endured in the past 20 years. Others envied their high salaries and subsidies, but few knew that they, as the core members, had used almost all of their savings for this project. He and his wife were still living in the old house that the school had allocated to them 20 years ago. He walked to class every day because he couldn't bear to pay a coachman and a horse. In a year, he had enough money to make another model. Apart from his wife, who had lived a poor life with him, even his 2 children couldn't understand these things. They only went home once a year. You're welcome. But I'm curious, why do you want to study this? Meg asked Hayter with a smile. Meg Alex's memories were almost all about swordsmanship and combat. After 100 years of relatively peaceful development on the Norland continent, commerce has developed tremendously. There are even many trading companies that span the entire continent. Manpower and animal power were beginning to be insufficient to meet the needs of production. Although magic was a very powerful existence, the high cost limited the use of magic by the workshop owners. Of course, the use of magic was still very common in some expensive and delicate products. So, we think that this world urgently needs a low-cost and high-efficiency power plant. This idea has been approved and supported by the City Lord's Castle. This is also why this project, which hasn't produced any effective results, has persisted until now, Hayter replied seriously. Yes, this is the best time. Meg nodded. According to Hayter, capitalism had developed to a certain extent on the Norland continent, and people were beginning to urgently need something that could effectively increase production efficiency. At this time, if a mature steam engine could be developed, it would definitely be popularized and used in a short period of time. This was probably why the City Lord's Castle had the patience to support this money-burning project for over 20 years. Chapter 256. The system is warning the host that the host's thoughts may speed up the development of this world and bring about many unforeseen events. Therefore, the host should immediately stop your thoughts and do not act on them. The system's serious voice sounded, full of warning. System, do you want to sell it too? Meg asked calmly. The system is not that kind of system. The system will definitely not do something that could cause chaos in the world. The system's voice was still serious. Looking at the development of history, as long as the Hayter steam engine is introduced, it will not take many years for another steam engine to appear due to market demand. Then, the world will enter the era of industrial revolution. Therefore, this kind of development is completely foreseeable and unstoppable. Now that I'm throwing out a blueprint, I'm just shortening the time frame. Meg calmly refuted. But with the buffer of more than 20 years, the world can completely develop in other directions. Moreover, the host is using the history of Earth to set up this magical world. The system does not accept this kind of refutation. The system responded seriously. System, are you stupid? If I sell it for 50,000 gold coins, then I can directly upgrade the restaurant to LV2. In the end, all the money will end up in your pocket. I won't earn a single cent, and you're still here talking to me non-stop. Aren't you making things difficult for yourself? Meg could not help but roll his eyes in his heart. The system suddenly fell silent. Meg's mouth twitched. As expected, when it came to money, the system's moral values would fall off a cliff. No, host, this is a false proposition. Although the 50,000 gold coins will end up in my hands in the end, the 50,000 gold coins will only end up in my hands after you spend the money. In this case, the person who spent the money is still you. The system was silent for a minute, and its tone was a little annoyed. I didn't expect you to be so smart. Meg raised his eyebrows, a little surprised. Of course. The system's voice was a little proud, but it immediately reacted and said seriously, Host, please do not try to question the system's intelligence. I think this is the fastest way to make money at the moment. If you don't let me sell it, then I won't level up. I don't have money anyway, so I can't level up. Meg curled his lips and said indifferently. The system hesitated for a moment before saying, This system can provide the host with a top-notch plan. Speak, Meg said calmly. The system can provide the host with hundreds of classic steam engine blueprints. The host is only responsible for selling the blueprints. I'll take 80% and you'll take 20%. The system's voice was tempting. System, are you doubting my intelligence? Meg rolled his eyes and mocked, Do I need you to provide me with blueprints? I have a few classic models in my head. I even remember the craftsmanship standards of the parts. Don't even think about getting a share of this. I can even draw the blueprints of internal combustion engines with my bare hands. In the future, you won't have a share in the production of cars either. Are you angry? Beep beep beep, the system suddenly emitted a series of chaotic noises. That's right. Meg immediately felt a lot better. He turned to Hader with a smile, and asked, Principal Hader, what do you want to talk to me about today? It's still too early to talk about how to apply this energy to production, but I'd like to consult you on how to convert this type of piston motion into other types of motion. Of course, this kind of consultation isn't free of charge. I sincerely invite you to join our team. If your suggestions can be applied to the machine, then you'll become an official member. You'll enjoy the benefits of the City Lord's castle, and you'll also receive a recognized title in Chaos School. Hader looked at Meg with a serious expression. It took him 25 years of research to come up with such a simple design. Wouldn't it be too hurtful for me to give him a fully formed steam engine that can be directly used? Meg looked at Hader's sincere expression, then at the simple steam engine blueprints on the table, and was suddenly struck by the urge to draw a perfect steam engine blueprint. However, he repressed the urge in the end, and shook his head with a smile as he said, I'm just a chef, so I can only provide some layman's advice. Also, I probably won't be able to join your team. The restaurant is quite busy, so I probably won't have time to do anything else. At the last moment, Meg changed his mind. He decided not to hand over the steam engine blueprints so soon. Handing over the blueprints would be a one-off deal. There was no such thing as patent protection in this world. Selling something that could change the world for tens of thousands of gold coins wasn't something that a businessman would do. This was a very valuable bargaining chip. Even though Meg respected people like Hader who were obsessed with invention and research, he wasn't naive enough to give away this bargaining chip. A strength point was very expensive, and it would only become more and more expensive in the future. Seeing as he was going to give this world a push, he had to pay him more for his hard work. You're the owner of the restaurant now. You're a businessman. You're an evil capitalist. Meg murmured to himself as he looked at Hader with a calm expression. He clearly couldn't discuss business with Hader. Firstly, it would seem like a capitalist was bullying an honest scholar. Secondly, he wasn't at that level yet. If he wanted to discuss business with him, he had to discuss it with the City Lord's castle and the Grey Temple. That was the best way to maximize his profits. Once the steam engine was invented, it would provide stable and efficient kinetic energy in industry. Trains would be the easiest way to popularize it. Furthermore, it would become the most important mode of transportation and transportation. It would completely change the way people traveled. Only entities at the level of the City Lord's castle and the Grey Temple would be able to popularize such a massive project. After all, Chaos City had a good relationship with all races. Perhaps a railway network with Chaos City as the center would be able to spread across the entire Norland continent in the future. Of course, if there really came a day when they would make a deal, Meg wouldn't mind including Hader and the others. Researchers should enjoy the honor and reputation that they deserved. The City Lord's castle and Chaos School would definitely reward them handsomely. I see. Hader was slightly disappointed. However, he quickly turned to Meg with anticipation in his eyes, and asked, "Then what do you think, Mr. Mack?" Chapter 257. At the entrance of the restaurant, Hader looked at Meg and said, "Mr. Mack, you really are a genius. After listening to your explanation, everything became clear to me. Although you don't want to join our team, if you're interested, you can research the steam engine on your own. If you need, we don't mind providing you with the necessary information. We won't compete with you for the results in the future. We only hope that the steam engine can be released as soon as possible to prove that what we've been doing is correct. All right. If I have time, I'll ask the president for advice." Meg looked at Hader's serious expression, and suddenly felt a pang of guilt. Look at how open and honest this intellectual was. As a capitalist, he was full of guilt. However, Heidel's words had also given Mag an idea. If he were to suddenly come up with a steam engine and go to the City Lord's castle, that would be a little too abrupt. However, if he were to say that he had invented the steam engine based on Heidel's work, then everything would fall into place. Furthermore, with Heidel and the others as a lead, it would be a lot easier for him to collaborate with the City Lord. After sending Hader off, Meg turned to enter the restaurant. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw an old elf with a white beard standing in the distance, looking in the direction of the restaurant. He seemed to have been standing there for some time, and seemed to have been observing him. He was still a little sensitive when it came to elves. The restaurant has had some elven customers recently, and nothing has happened. Maybe he's just a curious person. Meg thought to himself. He locked the door and lifted a corner of the curtain to take a look. The old elf was already gone. He put down the blinds in confusion, and didn't think too much about it. Amy had become the disciple of Crassus and Julian, and the restaurant's reputation was growing. There would only be more and more prying eyes. He had to learn to accept it calmly, and then accept it as if nothing had happened. He believed that no one in this world would believe that the king of dragon slayers who once dominated the sky would now become the owner of a restaurant in Chaos City. Cooking. That's my job. Meg went into the kitchen and threw the matter of the steam engine to the back of his mind. There was nothing wrong with the idea of earning some extra money. However, the restaurant was a stable source of income. Now, the net profit was easily over 200,000 copper coins a day. Moreover, with the increase in the number of dishes and the increase in cooking speed, this number should still have room for growth. I have to think of a way to get rid of this turkey as soon as possible. But there is so much chicken that little me and I won't be able to finish it even after a few days. I have to use the ingredients provided by the system to make sure that the taste of each dish is not the slightest bit different. Meg opened the refrigerator and looked at the 2 compartments full of turkey chicken. He had a headache. Forget it. If I can't finish it, I'll just throw it away. I didn't buy it with money anyway. Meg closed the fridge door and went upstairs to sleep. For dinner, Meg cooked a meal of braised chicken and rice according to Amy's request. Meg also prepared a boneless braised chicken for Ugly Duckling. He poured chicken broth over the rice, and the little thing grabbed a small plate with its little paws and ate with relish. There seems to be a little bit left. Meg looked at the remaining braised chicken in the large pot. Because Ugly Duckling didn't eat much, there was still more than half of the braised chicken for 3 people left. There was also a little extra rice. Amy stood at the entrance of the kitchen, and looked at Meg with a pleading expression as she asked, "Father, if there's any extra, can you put it on a plate for me?" Amy has already eaten 2 bowls of rice. Even though it's delicious, you can't eat too much. Meg shook his head with a smile. She really was a greedy little kitten that wanted more. Amy is already full, so I won't eat anymore. However, if there's any extra, I want to give some to Jessica. She definitely hasn't eaten yet, she always saves her food for her mother. Amy shook her head with a conflicted expression as she said, Charles and Derek definitely haven't eaten yet either. If they see that I'm only giving some to Jessica, they'll definitely be sad, even though they're both very strong. My Amy is so kind. Alright, don't be conflicted. Count how many children there are in total, and I'll make 1 for each of them and 2 for Jessica. That way, they'll all be able to eat. Meg stroked Amy's hair with a smile before squatting down to look into her eyes, and earnestly said, "But only this once. We're not at the stage where we can help others just yet." Amy nodded obediently before giving Meg a kiss on the cheek, and a joyful smile appeared on her face as she said, there are 20 children in total. Father, you're the best. Go play with Ugly Duckling for a while. It'll take a while before it's ready." Meg stroked Amy's hair with a smile before walking toward the fridge. He suddenly felt a pang of heartache. Even though he could use his own ingredients for the turkey, he couldn't afford to skimp on the cost of the other ingredients. The ingredients for 20 servings of braised chicken cost 6,000 copper coins. However, how could he refuse Amy's request? Meg wanted to protect the kindness in Amy's heart and protect her smile. However, he would only do this once. Even though he was making a lot of money every day, the exorbitant cost of purchasing strength points still made Meg feel a little pressured. Improving his own strength was the most pressing matter. As for doing good deeds, that was something that only those who had the energy to spare could do. He wasn't a saint who would sacrifice himself for others. In his heart, Amy was his #1 priority. Meg made 22 servings of braised chicken and rice in 2 batches. They were all packed in the lunchboxes provided by the system, and carefully placed into 2 large bags. "Let's go, Amy," Meg said with a smile as he held a bag in each hand. "Father, can you wait for me for a moment? I want to change my clothes," Amy said to Meg as she tugged on her beautiful purple dress. "Alright, go ahead." Meg nodded with a smile. It seemed that she wanted to dress up to see her old friends. Amy nodded before running up the stairs with her short legs. She soon came downstairs and changed her purple dress into a simple light yellow floral dress. "Are you going to wear this out today?" Meg asked as he looked at Amy with a hint of surprise. He had bought this dress because he thought it would be more convenient for her to wear at home. It was the simplest dress that she had. He had thought that Amy would wear the purple dress with the little flower on the chest. That was her favorite dress. Jessica likes yellow dresses. She'll be very happy to see me wear it. Amy nodded with a serious expression. "Alright, let's go then." Meg's heart softened. He hadn't seen such a pure and beautiful friendship in a long time. Meg carried the 2 large bags, and Amy carried Ugly Duckling in her arms. They locked the door and walked toward the Aiden Square. After walking for about 10 minutes, they arrived at a long corridor not far away. A dozen or so children were sitting quietly on chairs, counting their earnings for the day. Chapter 258. It was a little girl in a gray linen dress. She was about 5 or 6 years old, and was half a head taller than Amy. The dress seemed to have been modified from an adult's dress, and there were many patches on it. Her hair had been casually cut to just below her ears, but her little face was very clean, and her bright black eyes seemed to be able to see the reflections of good and evil. The little girl's mouth was wide open, and her eyes were filled with elation as she looked at Amy. She flipped over the back of the bench and ran toward them. "Jessica!" Amy also yelled with elation as she also ran toward her on her short little legs. The little girl ran over with her arms wide open, but she suddenly stopped when she was 2 steps away from Amy. She withdrew her arms and looked at Amy's little dress with elation in her eyes. "Jessica, why aren't you hugging me?" Amy was a little displeased as she looked at Jessica. "Because Amy is wearing a beautiful dress today, and I don't want to dirty your dress." Jessica shook her head with a smile, revealing a missing front tooth. Her eyes were still fixed on Amy's dress, and she really was very happy. Her eyes then fell on Ugly Duckling in Amy's arms, and her eyes lit up with elation as she said, "And this kitten is also yellow. It's so cute." "It's not a kitten, it's Ugly Duckling. It's actually a duckling, and it hatched from a duck egg." Amy shook her head with an earnest expression. "Really? But it doesn't look like a duck at all." Jessica was a little conflicted as she looked at Ugly Duckling. However, she quickly turned to Amy with anticipation in her eyes, and asked, "Can I hug it?" "Meow." Ugly Duckling raised its little paw with an expression of refusal. "Of course." Amy nodded before turning to Ugly Duckling. "Ugly Duckling, this is my good friend Jessica. You have to be good, or you'll have to run 5 extra laps today." Meow. Ugly Duckling immediately gave in, and it rolled its eyes as it allowed Jessica to take it from it with a resigned expression. "Aw! It's so adorable and awesome." Jessica caressed Ugly Duckling's kitten with elation. "Amy! Ai Xiaomi!" The other children in the hallway also caught sight of Amy, and they all greeted her. Some of them even gathered around her with curious looks on their faces as they looked at Ugly Duckling in Jessica's arms. Meanwhile, Amy greeted them one by one with a happy expression on her little face. The little guy's popularity is pretty good, but it seems that the habit of giving people nicknames isn't a recent one. Meg couldn't help but smile. These children ranged in age from 4 or 5 to 8 or 9 years old. Their clothes were rather shabby, and they looked just like the first time he saw Amy. The little girl named Jessica looked very intelligent and sensible. She seemed to have the best relationship with Amy. Xiaomi said that you are all her good friends, so she asked Uncle to bring you delicious food. You guys haven't had dinner yet, right? Then, can we have one each? Meg said to the children with a smile. Sure. All of the children's eyes immediately lit up as they stared at the 2 bags in Meg's hands. Jessica, this is my father. He made super delicious braised chicken and rice for all of you, Amy whispered into Jessica's ear, and he made a portion for your mother too. Father. Father. Jessica looked up at Meg with a hint of envy in her bright eyes. However, a joyful smile quickly appeared on her face as she nodded at Amy, and said, Thank you, Amy. I knew you were the best to me. Come over here and eat. Sit down on the chairs. Meg walked over to the hallway with the 2 large bags and gently placed them down. He then took out the braised chicken and rice from the bags one by one. Due to the fact that some of the children were too young, he arranged them in a row on the chairs and opened the lids. It smells so good. Gulp, the alluring aroma of the braised chicken wafted through the hallway, and all of the children's eyes immediately lit up as they swallowed involuntarily. However, they were all rather hesitant at the sight of the delicious braised chicken, and none of them dared to step forward. Eat up, children. This is your dinner. Meg opened the lid of the last braised chicken, and there were only 3 boxes left in the bag. There were only 19 children present. All of the children looked at one another, but none of them stepped forward. If we miss out on this meal, we won't be able to eat such delicious food for a long time. Father's braised chicken is super delicious. Amy led Jessica over to a braised chicken and took Ugly Duckling from her with a smile on her face. It smells so good. Thank you, Amy's father. I'll have the first bite. Jessica's eyes lit up as she looked at Meg with a smile. She picked up a piece of chicken with her chopsticks and took a bite, upon which her eyes immediately lit up. What a wonderful taste. She didn't know what words she could use to describe this flavor. All she knew was that it was absolutely delicious. She had never tasted anything so delicious in her entire life. It's so delicious. Jessica swallowed the piece of chicken in her mouth and sniffed as she fought back the tears in her eyes. She then immediately put the remaining piece of chicken into her mouth. Don't cry, Jessica, are you all right? Amy hurriedly wiped away her tears with a concerned expression. I'm fine. It's so delicious that I'm crying. Jessica shook her head as she put another piece of chicken into her mouth. Tears streamed down her face as she chewed. Meg shook his head with a smile. This little girl was simply too adorable. However, this was the best compliment he could give to a chef, and a sense of pride welled up in his heart. All of the other children also couldn't help themselves at the sight of Jessica eating so happily. After a brief hesitation, they all made their way over to the braised chicken and began to dig in as well. It's so delicious. Amy, your father is the best. It's so delicious. Wow. I can't help myself either. All of the children's praises were intermingled with a few sobs, and the atmosphere was still very warm and joyful. Jessica, let me tell you a secret. If you pour this soup over the rice, the moon rice will taste even better, Amy whispered into Jessica's ear. There really is a moon in this rice. It's so good. Jessica's eyes lit up at the sight of the rice in the box, and all of the other children immediately exclaimed in amazement. It does seem like doing some good deeds from time to time will change one's mood. Meg stood off to the side, and a smile also appeared on his face as he looked at the smiles on the children's faces. If he didn't have the pressure to recover in the future, doing some good deeds would be a good choice. Chapter 259. The Moreton Manor was located in the northwest corner of the wealthy district of Chaos City. It occupied a very large area, and the gray and white architectural style was very luxurious. However, the square architectural style and the single color of the building also made it look a little serious and rigid. The evening lights were lit, and the servants in the manor walked in and out with serious expressions. Their footsteps were silent, and they didn't communicate with each other at all. It was as if they were performing a pantomime. In a luxurious hall, there was a long mahogany table, and there were about a dozen people in luxurious clothes sitting around it. In front of each of them was a fried steak with caviar. However, everyone's hands were placed under the table, and no one said anything. The atmosphere was a little tense. The crystal chandelier above lit up the entire hall, and there were a few servants standing off to the side with serious expressions. Jeffries sat at the head of the table, and his gaze swept past his wife, Denise Marquis, who was sitting beside him. His gaze paused on his second son, Cyril, who was sitting beside his wife with his head slightly lowered. He skipped over his daughter-in-law and landed on his eldest son, Lance, who was sitting a little further away with a straight posture. This eldest son of Chaos City was famous for his stubbornness, but even he didn't dare to look him in the eye. Jeffrey's brows furrowed slightly. He glanced at Jongsun Mickey, who was sitting next to him, and finally looked at the young girl wearing a veil. He said with a displeased expression, "If you're too embarrassed to take it off when you're eating, then don't sit at the table." The people of family Moriton are never afraid of others' gazes. Everyone turned to look at the young girl sitting in the corner in unison. Big Sister Gloria is afraid that her stunning beauty will scare us. I haven't seen that beautiful big sister for many years. Heidi, who was sitting next to Cyril, pursed her lips with a hint of mockery in her voice. She was a young girl around 16 or 17 years old, and was quite pretty. Yes, I remember that big sister was very beautiful when she was young. Her twin sister, Hernie, who was sitting next to her, nodded in agreement. The two of them looked almost identical, and they were both staring at the young girl in the corner with an intense gaze. That's right. Sister-in-law said that she was born beautiful, and that she would definitely be one of the most beautiful women in Chaos City when she grows up. Why doesn't she even dare to see people now? Aurora, who was sitting in the middle, said with a smile. Her bright red lipstick made her face even paler. She was only 30 years old, but there were already many fine lines at the corners of her eyes. The young girl in the veil clearly stiffened, and her hands clenched into fists, but she still didn't say anything. Aurora, and Aurora of Auroras, and Aurora's Auroras, but she didn't dare to say anything. Father, Gloria has already grown accustomed to wearing a veil since she was young. This is her freedom, and I think you should respect her decision. Lance looked up at Jeffrey, and met his eyes without any intention of backing down. Freedom. A hint of mockery appeared on Jeffrey's face, and his expression abruptly darkened. He pressed his hands onto the table, and leaned forward slightly as he raised his voice. I gave you your so-called freedom, and then you went to become a poor teacher. You made me the biggest joke in Chaos City. Everyone is saying that I, Jeffrey, gave birth to a good son, and chose to teach a bunch of little kids instead of taking care of my family's assets. Now, you dare to talk to me about a little girl's freedom. Women are nothing but accessories to men in this world. If they can't be married off, then they're not even worth being an accessory. Cyril looked up at Aurora, and a smile appeared on his face. However, he quickly withdrew his gaze, and continued to look down with an obedient expression. Aurora, Hernie, and Hernie looked at Gloria with a gloating expression, as if they had nothing to do with the woman that Jeffrey was referring to. Teaching is a noble thing, and it's a career that I'm passionate about. This is my choice, and also my freedom. Lance abruptly rose to his feet, and looked at Jeffrey with an intense gaze. He then turned to Gloria, and raised his voice as he said, As for women, they're not anyone's subordinates. They have their own thoughts, and they're capable of doing the same things as men. This world is prejudiced against them, and we're supposed to correct this world's misconceptions. Gloria abruptly raised her head to look at the side of Lance's face, and her purple eyes lit up under her veil. Her father had given up his identity as the heir of the Moriton family to become a common language teacher at Chaos School. Was this the real reason behind his father's decision? How arrogant! You think you can correct this world's misconceptions? Jeffrey retracted his hands, and leaned back in his chair. He looked at his eldest son, and a hint of disappointment flashed through his eyes. However, his smile became even more derisive as he said, If you weren't born in family Moriton, you wouldn't even have the money to pay for your daughter's medical fees. What right do you have to correct this world? Father's health isn't very good, big brother. Don't make him angry, Cyril said to Lance with an earnest expression, and there was a hint of resignation in his voice. Lance clenched his fists, but he couldn't bring himself to say anything else. After a moment of impasse, he slumped back into his seat in a feeble manner. Indeed, if he hadn't been born in the Moreton family, how would a normal teacher like him have the money to treat Gloria's illness? Gloria's hands were trembling slightly, and the fire in her heart was burning brighter and brighter. There was a kind of power that was trying to break free from her shackles. Mickey held on to Gloria's hand with a concerned expression, and shook his head gently. He was only 10 years old, and he didn't understand what the adults were saying. However, he knew that his grandpa was angry, and it was best that no one said anything at this time. Otherwise, they would be scolded. This world will never change. The Aiden Chamber of Commerce will always rule Chaos City's economy. The rich will always be the rich, and women will always be the vassals and vases. Geoffrey withdrew his gaze from Lance, and picked up the knife in front of him as he spoke in a low and confident voice. Everyone else heaved a sigh of relief, and also picked up the cutlery in front of them. Grandpa, I believe in Father's words. Women can also do what men can do. We don't have to be vases. We can do whatever we want. I won't be anyone's vassal. I want to be an independent and free person. Right at this moment, Gloria, who had been silent all this time, suddenly stood up. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was very firm. Everyone's hands froze, and they were all in disbelief. They didn't think that Gloria, who was usually so obedient and quiet, would dare to refute Geoffrey's words. This was almost impossible in family Moreton. Lance also turned to look at Gloria in surprise, as if he was meeting his own daughter for the first time. Chapter 260. The atmosphere in the hall instantly dropped to a freezing point. Mickey's eyes followed Gloria as she ran out of the hall. His legs wobbled, and he wanted to get up as well, but the noblewoman beside him reached out and held him down. She shook her head with a hint of warning, and aside from concern, there was also a hint of relief on her face. Everyone wore different expressions, but most of them were gloating over Geoffrey's misfortune. They were thinking about what kind of punishment he would give Gloria and Lance's family in a fit of rage. Geoffrey also couldn't hide the surprise in his eyes. His gaze lingered on Gloria's empty seat for a while, but surprisingly, he didn't seem to be too angry. Instead, he used his knife to cut into his steak slowly as he said, "Let's eat." "Father, Gloria, Aurora said hesitantly. "I would feel more comfortable if you could wear a veil to cover your hideous face instead of relying on a pile of messy powder to paint the wall. If I find out that you've consumed the Dark Magician's hallucination potion again, your pocket money will be reduced to 0 and you'll be chased out of the house." Geoffrey's voice was a little cold. There were still traces of blood on the medium-rare steak, but it was easily chewed in his mouth. His deep eyes seemed to have seen through everything. "Yes. Yes." Aurora lowered her head, and didn't dare to say anything else. What can a woman do? Only an old fool like Ian would let a woman take charge of the family. Geoffrey thought to himself as he ate. However, this was the first time that Gloria had objected to his words, right? It was just like when Lance had first questioned his words. The father and daughter were quite similar when they were serious. "If the freckles on my face are healed, what can I do?" In the garden of the Moreton Manor, Gloria squatted beside a small pond, and looked at the fish swimming in the pond as she softly murmured to herself. "Why is Mr. Mac here?" Luna was standing not far away, looking at Meg's back in the hallway with a hint of confusion in her heart. She took a few steps forward, and was greeted by the sight of a row of children eating happily. Their faces were brimming with joy and vitality. Could it be that Mr. Mac brought delicious food for them? Luna's eyes immediately lit up. She looked at Amy, who was standing off to the side with Ugly Duckling in her arms, and immediately figured out that Amy must have brought Meg here. As for Mag, they didn't expect him to come. Every serving of Mamie Restaurant's food was so expensive. If Mag was using the restaurant's food to entertain the children, then he was being too generous. Teacher Luna. Amy turned around just in time to see Luna, and she immediately waved happily at her. Hello, Teacher Luna. The children all stood up upon hearing this, and all greeted Luna happily. Even the delicious food couldn't slow them down in the slightest. Young Mistress Luna. Meg turned around with a hint of surprise. He looked at Luna, who was carrying a cloth bag, and the children's reactions, and immediately understood why Luna had come here. In the past 3 years, Luna had provided Amy with a lot of help and warmth. To Amy, she was the only one, and to Luna, it was probably the same to all of the children. Hello, children. Luna waved at the children with a wide smile on her face. She quickly strode over to Meg, and nodded with a smile. Hello, Mr. Meg. Are you here to see the children? Meg asked with a smile as he looked at Luna. Luna was wearing a dark green floral dress today, and the silk scarf embroidered with golden lilies was still tied around her neck. When she was in front of the children, her smile was very amiable, and it made people feel very warm. Yes, but it looks like I'm not needed today. Mr. Meg has brought some delicious food for the children. Luna nodded, and took a deep breath. She looked at the braised chicken in the box, and her eyes lit up. What an enticing aroma, but this seems to be different from the dishes that the restaurant has served before. Could it be that Mr. Meg has released a new dish? Yes, this is the restaurant's new dish, but it hasn't been officially released yet. If Teacher Luna hasn't had dinner yet, perhaps you can have dinner with the children. Meg nodded, and took out a braised chicken and rice from the bag. I just made 2 extra servings. No, I've already eaten. Little Colin isn't back yet, is he? I'll go see where he is first. Luna waved her hand, and swept her gaze over the children. She put down the cloth bag in her hand, and was about to walk out. Teacher Luna, you don't have to look for him. Colin said that someone wants to take him home to be his son. The adults of the Grey Temple have already taken care of the paperwork for him. He won't have to beg anymore, and can eat delicious white rice every day, a child said with a hint of envy in his voice. How can white rice compare to the chicken made by Amy's father? This is the first time I've eaten chicken. After eating it, my body feels warm and comfortable. The child next to her giggled and said with a very happy expression. I see. That's great. Luna stopped in her tracks when she heard that, and a smile appeared on her face. The best home for these children was the Grey Temple, which could find suitable adopters for them. However, generally, those who had the needs and conditions to adopt children were more inclined to adopt children who were born not long ago, and not these children who were used to being wild outside, even though they were still cute and kind children in her eyes. Teacher Luna, just have 1 serving. Every time you bring food to us, you eat with us. You definitely haven't eaten this time. Father's braised chicken is really delicious, Amy said expectantly as she looked up at Luna. Yes, Teacher Luna. It's so delicious that I'm crying, Jessica said with a nod, the tears on her face still wet. The other children also chimed in, and begged Luna to have 1 serving. They had to let Teacher Luna eat such delicious food. It would be a pity to miss it. Have 1 serving. It won't taste good if it gets cold. The children all want you to eat it, Meg said with a smile as he handed over the braised chicken and rice in his hand. Luna looked at the children's innocent and expectant eyes, and then at Meg's kind smile. She hesitated for a moment, and then reached out to take the 2 boxes. She nodded with a smile, and said, Okay, then I'll eat with you all today. Be good and eat until you're full. Yay! The children's faces lit up with happy smiles, and they obediently returned to their seats. Chapter 261. The tempting aroma made Luna swallow her saliva. Looking at the children who were completely immersed in the delicious food, she also picked up her chopsticks and took a bite of the chicken. What a thick and delicious chicken soup. The chicken is so tender and smooth. It's so delicious. Luna's eyes suddenly lit up. The delicious taste spread in her mouth. She could taste the meat of the turkey. But how did the chicken soup improve the taste to such an extreme? It also contained a tempting fresh aroma. It was a taste she had never tasted before. This is. After eating a piece of chicken, Luna picked up a piece of shiitake mushroom. The rich aroma came to her nose. Unlike ordinary mushrooms, whose aroma was reserved, this kind of aroma seemed to want to let everyone know. It didn't hide it at all. Maybe the secret to improving the taste of the chicken soup is here. Luna put the shiitake mushroom into her mouth expectantly. She took a gentle bite, and the chicken soup overflowed from the succulent shiitake mushroom. Although it was dry, the texture was not stiff at all. It was still fresh and smooth. The rich mushroom aroma wreaked havoc in the mouth. After swallowing, there was still a lingering fragrance in the mouth. It was a taste that made people reluctant to part with and intoxicated. It's really delicious. Mr. Meg, your cooking skills are really amazing. Luna couldn't help but praise. If the Yangzhou fried rice made by Meg had surprised her the first time, then the rujiamo, tofu pudding, and now the braised chicken and rice, Meg had been breaking his own mind. Every dish brought an extraordinary enjoyment to people. Such talent could only be described as genius. Miss Luna, you're too kind. Meg smiled. Being complimented by a beautiful lady was naturally something that made him happy. The dinner ended with the children's laughter. Every box was eaten clean, not even a drop of chicken soup was left. Only a 7-year-old child in the corner had half of the chicken soup left. He carefully closed the box, looked at Meg, and asked, "Uncle, can I borrow this box for one night? My sister hasn't eaten yet, so I want to bring this delicacy home for her to try." "Of course you can. This box can only be used once. You can throw it away after you use it. You don't have to return it to me." Meg nodded with a smile. He took out one of the remaining 2 servings of braised chicken and rice and placed it in the other bag before handing it to the child as he said, "Also, take this braised chicken and rice with you to eat with your little sister. Half a serving won't be enough. Throw it away." "Uncle, can I keep it? I've never had such a good bowl before." Jessica looked at the smooth and soft transparent bowl in her hand and asked Meg with anticipation. "I want to keep it for dinner too. My bowl cracked again yesterday and can't hold water anymore. This bowl is really great." The other children also chimed in as they hugged the takeout boxes in their hands as if they were holding a treasure. Meg's heart suddenly tightened upon seeing this. These disposable plastic takeout bowls and boxes were like treasures in the eyes of these children. Poverty had made them experience the hardships of life at an early age, and they were struggling to survive in this world with their frail bodies. "All right, then you can all keep it." Meg forced a smile onto his face as he nodded. "Yay! Thank you, Uncle." The children immediately cheered as they raised the boxes in their hands above their heads as if they had received an incredible reward. "It's getting dark. Goodbye, Teacher Luna, Uncle, and Amy. I have to go home now." A child hugged a bowl in his arms as he bade farewell and ran away. All the other children also bade farewell. "Children, be careful on the road. Take the main road with a lot of people." Luna hurriedly reminded them as she watched the children disperse in all directions. "Amy, I have to go home too. My mother is still waiting for me at home. Your dress today is so beautiful, and Ugly Duckling is super cute. I hope I can play with you again next time." Jessica hugged the takeout box in her hands as she looked at Amy with an adorable smile on her face. She patted Ugly Duckling's head with anticipation and reluctance in her eyes. Jessica, is your mother still coughing every day? Are her eyes all right? Amy looked at Jessica with some reluctance and asked with concern. Yes, it seems to have worsened in the autumn. Jessica nodded with a dejected expression, but a smile quickly appeared on her face as she said, but Mother said that she'll be fine in the winter. Once her eyes recover, she'll be able to sew things for other people again. That way, I can stay at home in the winter, and it'll be a little warmer at home. Are you sick? Meg looked at Jessica's slightly dirty clothes and the intricate stitches that had been sewn together. It turned out that her mother was quite adept at sewing, but if she couldn't get out of bed now, it would be very difficult for her to survive the winter. Meg couldn't help but furrow his brows at the sight of the adorable smile on Jessica's face. Jessica's current situation was most likely similar to Amy's, but if her mother really didn't survive the next winter, then no one would be able to continue to take care of her in her place. Yes, she'll definitely get better. Amy patted Jessica's shoulder like a little adult. She touched her pocket and took her little fist out of her pocket and put it behind her back. She looked at Jessica mysteriously and said, Jessica, I want to give you a present. Guess what it is? A beautiful stone. No. A love tree root. That's not right either. Amy shook her head as she pulled her little hand out from behind her back, revealing a yellow butterfly hair clip. She smiled as she said, It's a butterfly hair clip. Yellow is your favorite color. Wow! It's so beautiful. Jessica's eyes lit up as she looked at the hair clip in Amy's hand with joy. But after a moment of hesitation, she shook her head and said, No, this is too beautiful. I can't accept it. It'll definitely look better with your dress. No, it'll look better if you wear it. Let me put it on for you. Amy shook her head as she picked up the hair clip and stood on her tiptoes to tuck it into Jessica's hair. She nodded happily and said, It's really beautiful. Jessica, you're so beautiful. Really? A smile also appeared on Jessica's face as she tried her best to look up. Yes, Jessica is really beautiful, Luna said with a smile. She was also a little touched by Amy's feelings for her friend. Thank you, Amy. Jessica hugged Amy with elation as she gently touched the hair clip. She couldn't hide the smile on her face. Meg looked at the yellow butterfly hair clip and her bright smile. She really was very adorable. After a moment of hesitation, he fished out a dragon coin from his pocket and placed it between the boxes of braised chicken and rice. It's getting dark, Jessica. You should go home first so that your mother won't worry. Take this braised chicken and rice home for her. Meg tied up the bag and handed it to Jessica with a smile as he said, Be careful when you carry it. The chicken soup will spill out easily. Thank you, Uncle. Mother will definitely get better soon after eating your food. Jessica accepted the bag and looked at Meg with gratitude. Meg shook his head with a serious expression and said, You won't get better just from eating a bowl of braised chicken. You have to get your mother to see a doctor. Only after she recovers from her illness can she work, and only then will you be able to enjoy a warm winter at home. All right, I'll tell her. Jessica was also a sensible child. She nodded obediently, then waved her hand and said, Teacher Luna, Uncle, goodbye. Goodbye, Jessica, Luna replied with a smile. Goodbye, Jessica. Amy also waved goodbye. Goodbye, Amy, Jessica said to Amy. Jessica said to Amy as she carefully walked over with the braised chicken in one hand and the box in the other. When the children grow up, they'll be able to live on their own. I'm sure they'll be kind-hearted, Luna said with a smile as she looked at Jessica's departing figure. That's right. You've planted a seed of kindness in their hearts. It'll benefit them for the rest of their lives. Meg also nodded in agreement. Father, will Jessica's mother get better? Amy looked up at Meg with a concerned expression. Chapter 262. After bidding farewell to the children, Meg and Luna walked side by side in the Aiden Square under the setting sun. Amy and Ugly Duckling were playing hide-and-seek in front of them, and their bell-like laughter rang out across the entire square. Luna and Mag were talking about how the decimal system and the multiplication table had caused a huge stir in the mathematics world of Rodu. The mathematicians of the Roth Empire were trying to verify the feasibility of the multiplication table, as the decimal system had already been used once when the currency of the continent had been unified. It was the result of a collision between different mathematicians and different mathematical civilizations. However, the Roth Empire still maintained its tradition of using the sexagesimal system, just like how the elves still used the decimal system. Even though the decimal system had been invented by the mathematicians of the entire continent at the time, it had never received much attention. In their eyes, the decimal system was even more complex and difficult to understand, and they even had to convert it back to the sexagesimal system. It could be said that those mathematicians had fallen into the trap of tradition, and had never thought of using the decimal system. As a result, this most advanced and simple algorithm was still only used in the monetary system, even after several decades. However, Meg's multiplication table could quickly calculate single-digit multiplication, and even children would be able to use it with ease as long as they memorized it well. This revolutionary algorithm and discovery was undoubtedly an earth-shattering discovery for the entire mathematics community. The simple permutation method encompassed all single-digit multiplication operations, and was enough to solve all single-digit multiplication problems, so it could easily solve all of the monetary problems in life. If it could be extended to tens and hundreds of digits, the speed and efficiency of the calculations would definitely far exceed that of other systems. It could even provide the possibility of three-digit multiplication, which was almost impossible to achieve in the sexagesimal system. Even Old Man Ferd could only do the simplest three-digit multiplication. Hence, during this period of time, all of the mathematicians of the Roth Empire had gathered in Rodu to discuss this issue. They were all debating whether to abandon the sexagesimal system and adopt the decimal system. The revolutionaries saw a limitless future in the decimal system, while the conservatives thought that the decimal system was just a pseudo-proposition that had yet to be verified. The fact that no one had researched the decimal system for several decades was a testament to this. Now, a random guy was trying to overthrow a tradition that had been passed down for thousands of years with a so-called multiplication table. That was simply absurd. Meg couldn't help but smile as he listened to Luna's description. He didn't think that a simple multiplication table would cause such a stir in this world. Luna stopped in her tracks and looked at Meg with a serious expression as she said, "Mr. Meg, I was going to visit you today. My grandfather is on the side of the revolutionaries of the reform of the decimal system, so he wants you to come to Rodu and explain the feasibility of the multiplication table to everyone. Bye." "I can't do that. Mathematics is just a hobby for me. I can't abandon the restaurant and go to Rodu to teach them the multiplication table." Meg shook his head with a smile as he looked at the Statue of Peace at the center of the plaza in the distance. Two white doves were perched on the olive branch, and he calmly said, "It's my duty to bring delicacies to my customers." Luna looked at the side profile of Meg's face. The golden light shone down upon him, making him appear as if he were covered in a layer of golden sand. Indeed, he was a prodigy mathematician, but he was also a prodigy chef. Compared to mathematics, it was a pity that a chef like him was missing from this world. She was a little apologetic as she said, "My apologies, Mr. Meg, for making such an unreasonable request." "That's all right. Young Mistress Luna's grandfather is a great educator who is dedicated to popularizing mathematics. If there's anything he needs, he can ask me at any time." Meg shook his head with a smile. He wasn't flexing, but if he were to abandon the restaurant and go to Rodu, the system would most likely go crazy. Furthermore, he had gone through a lot of trouble to get to Chaos City from Rodu, and he didn't want to go back there so quickly. God knew if he would fall into the vortex again. At a time like this, a letter was naturally the best option. Thank you, I'll pass on your message to him. A smile reappeared on Luna's face. Even though Meg didn't want to go to Rodu, it was still very good news that he was willing to continue to provide his thoughts and ideas. The two of them continued to walk for a while longer. Meg had thought that Luna would bring up the issue of providing assistance to these children, but to his surprise, she didn't say a single word throughout the entire journey. This also made her impression of him quite a bit. This girl was as pure as the white scarf on her shoulder. She was willing to do good deeds, but she wouldn't ask others to do the same for her. The sky gradually darkened, and Luna bade farewell to the two of them. Meg also walked back home with Amy. When they reached the center of the square, they saw a row of magic crystal walls that were around 4 meters tall on the side of the street. There were a few magic casters instructing the workers on how to install them. The war is going to start tomorrow. Meg looked at the crystal walls with anticipation in his eyes. These were most likely the preparations for the Aiden Square food competition that was going to begin the next day. Now that he was going to do it, he naturally wanted to get closer to the top. When they returned to the restaurant, there were still a few customers reading the notices at the entrance. When they saw Meg and Amy return, they hurriedly gathered around them with concerned expressions on their faces. Mr. Mac, I heard that the restaurant was destroyed. Are you guys all right? Meg was quite touched by the customer's concern, and he shook his head with a smile as he replied, We're fine. The culprits have already been taken away by the Grey Temple. The restaurant was only slightly damaged, but it won't affect our business tomorrow. Yeah, all the bad guys were burned to ashes by Amy's fireball. Amy nodded in agreement. Little boss is the best. Everyone burst into laughter upon hearing that. As long as Meg and Amy were both fine, everything was fine. Then, Mr. Mac, we haven't eaten yet. Why don't you make us something to eat? If the new dish is ready, why don't we? A bald man looked at Meg with a smile. He didn't finish his sentence, but what he wanted to say was self-evident. I'm sorry. Something like this happened today, and my young heart has been severely damaged. I need to calm down and rest, so I need to take a break today to calm myself down. Please go back, everyone. We'll open the restaurant as usual tomorrow, and we'll be serving the new dish. Meg calmly refused as he led Amy into the restaurant. This. The customers looked at one another in bewilderment as they watched the door close. Forget it. We should be considerate of Mr. Mac at a time like this. I just heard that there was a huge explosion in the restaurant at noon. A group of dozens of culprits surrounded the restaurant and destroyed it in all sorts of ways. The Grey Temple had to send a large army to suppress them, a small old man said as he slowly turned to leave. That terrifying. Then forget it. Let's look forward to the new dish tomorrow. We have to come early to line up. Chapter 263. Within a dimly lit cave, a white-robed elf sat with her legs crossed beneath the Tree of Life. A wisp of green light rose up from her body, connecting her to the Tree of Life behind her. Specks of fireflies were gathered between the heart-shaped leaves, forming a revolving light barrier around her. The green light shone upon her exquisitely beautiful face, and the small golden moon on her glabella seemed to be glowing. Her expression was relaxed and natural, and it was as if she had already fused as one with the Tree of Life. The entire cave was extremely quiet, and even the sound of the fireflies flapping their wings could be heard. Your Highness Irina. Right at this moment, the door of the cave opened slightly to the side, and Phyllis squeezed in from the side before running toward the Tree of Life. The green branches brushed past her body, and she wasn't obstructed on this occasion, but it still took her quite a bit of effort to reach the Tree of Life. "What happened this time, Beansprout?" Irina asked in a calm voice without opening her eyes. "Your Highness. There's new news from Rodu, but it looks like Snare won't be able to come back for the time being," Phyllis said in a quiet voice with a dejected expression. There was a red gash on her neck, as if she had been whipped by something. Irina immediately opened her eyes, and the green light above her head instantly receded. All of the fireflies around her also dispersed before flying upward. Who did this? Irina's gaze fell on the gash on Phyllis's neck, and she looked into Phyllis's eyes as she asked. "I'm fine, Your Highness." Phyllis hurriedly shook her head as she covered her neck with her hands in a panicked manner. What happened to Snare? Irina wasn't in a hurry to ask any more questions. Snare was attacked by an unknown demon and sustained some injuries. He's still recuperating in the embassy of Rodu, and his life isn't in any danger. However, his right leg has been injured, and he can't get out of bed yet, so he won't be able to make it back in time, Phyllis replied in a concerned manner. It's been so many years, and someone's finally starting to provoke me again. They're always making demon scapegoats, they really haven't learned anything. Irina cast her gaze toward the entrance of the cave with a mocking smile on her face. She slowly rose to her feet, and the branches of the Tree of Life began to rustle as if they were prostrating themselves to create a path for her. Your Highness, Phyllis is completely fine. I accidentally bumped into something. Phyllis hurriedly as she looked at Irina as she made her way toward the entrance. Then let the thing you hit take responsibility. The stone door slowly slid to the side and opened completely. She stood at the entrance of the cave and looked at the forest outside. In the end, she fixed her eyes on a big tree that was thick enough for several people to wrap their arms around it. She said in a commanding tone, "Do you want to come out yourself, or do you want me to make you come out?" Under the moonlight, the forest was quiet. Only the sound of insects could be heard. Very good. Irina's expression remained calm as she slowly raised her right hand and clenched it into a fist. Bam! With a muffled sound, a hole was blasted open in the middle of the tree. A black figure directly pierced through the tree and flew over. His throat was about 5 centimeters away from him, and he was suspended in midair. This was an elderly female elf with a slightly stooped figure. She wore a black robe that covered her entire body, and her hooked nose was a little long, giving her the appearance of an old witch. Her bloodied face was filled with horror, and she reflexively tried to avert her eyes at the sight of Irina, but her neck was completely immobilized. Irina's brows furrowed slightly as she calmly asked, "I remember you. You're the black dog following behind that old witch. You're the one who bit the bean sprout, right? You're not allowed to insult Mistress Helena." Heidi yelled as she glowered at Irina. She was looking at Irina with a crazed look in her eyes, as if she wanted to perish together with her. "Doggy Helena, bait me if you don't like it, old dog." Irina was still raising her left hand with a smile on her face. "You're a slut who insults our elven race. How dare you insult the esteemed Mistress Helena? You're a disgrace to the elven race. You should be nailed to the Tree of Life." Heidi yelled in a crazed manner as she glared at Irina with gritted teeth, looking as if she wanted to tear her apart. "Bullshit. Her Highness. Her Highness is the pride of the elven race and the idol of the younger generation." Phyllis yelled as she looked at Irina's back with a panicked expression. "Shut up." Irina's brows furrowed slightly as she raised her right hand, only to stop it in midair. You're a sinner who's been imprisoned under the Tree of Life. You dare to hit me? A smug look appeared on Heidi's face at the sight of Irina's frozen hand, and a hint of disdain appeared in her eyes as she looked at Irina. I don't want to dirty my hands. Irina also withdrew her left hand. Right at this moment, a green branch shot out of the cave, bypassing Irina before striking Heidi in the face with a vicious slap. Heidi's body flew through the air as if she had been struck by a sledgehammer, and she crashed into a tree with a thump, causing the tree to sway violently. When the truth is revealed, you're going to be despised by all of our elven brethren. Even if you have a sharp tongue, I'd like to see how many mouths you'll have to offer when the time comes. Heidi fell to the ground and threw up a mouthful of blood, along with a few black teeth. Half of her face was swollen, and the bright red mark on it was quite a frightening sight to behold. She looked up at Irina with a crazed look in her eyes. I, Irina, have done everything with a clear conscience, so there's no need for me to explain myself to anyone. Irina's expression remained calm as she looked up at the bright moon in the sky, and her expression gradually cooled as she said, just because I can't leave the cave doesn't mean I can't. Tell Helena that if Snare doesn't return to me in one piece in 7 days, then she can prepare to collect the corpses of all of the elven brethren that she's nominated over the years. Irina turned and walked into the cave as she spoke. Heidi looked at Irina's departing figure, and a horrified expression gradually appeared on her face as her body began to tremble uncontrollably. Also, I don't usually kill dogs, but if I do, it's very cruel. Even I'm scared of myself. Irina's footsteps faltered momentarily, and the stone door slowly closed behind her. Silence reigned again. Chapter 264. Father, can you tell me a story? Amy was lying on the bed with Ugly Duckling in her arms. She turned her head to look at Meg, who was reading information about the elven race at the table. Sure. Let me think about what story to tell Amy. Meg put down the information in his hands and sat down on the bed with a smile. The restaurant was usually busy, and Amy often fell asleep before the opening hours were over, so he felt a little guilty that he hadn't told her a story for days. After thinking for a while, his eyes lit up, and he said, "Let me tell Amy a story about Snow White." Okay. Amy nodded happily. Then, she asked curiously, is Snow White a princess made of snow? No, Snow White is a beautiful princess with skin as white as snow. Meg shook his head with a smile. Then, he began to tell Amy the story. In a faraway kingdom, there lived a king and a queen, and they longed for a child. So, they sincerely prayed to the heavens, God. We are all good kings and queens. Please give us a child. Not long after, the queen gave birth to a cute little princess. The girl's skin was as white as snow, her cheeks were as red as apples, and her hair was black and soft. So, the king and queen named her Snow White. Meg slowly told the story of Snow White in a low voice. The innocent and cute Snow White was almost killed by the evil queen, but she was taken in by the 7 dwarves. Then, they lived a happy life in the forest. However, the queen didn't give up. She pretended to be a witch and tricked Snow White into eating a poisoned apple. Amy and Ugly Duckling listened carefully. One moment, they were worried about Snow White, and the next moment, they were happy that she had received help from others. In the end, the prince and Snow White lived happily together, but the evil queen was struck to death by lightning and received her punishment. Mag finished the story. He looked at Amy, who was still awake, and stroked her hair. Amy, if a stranger gave you an apple, would you still eat it? He asked with a smile. Amy nodded. Her eyes were bright, and she didn't look sleepy at all. Amy was a little conflicted. She thought for a while, and asked, if I only eat 1 bite, will I be fine? Not even 1 bite. It's a deadly poison. Even 1 bite will poison you. Meg shook his head. This little one was really a little glutton. Even if it was a poisoned apple, she would only stop after tasting it. All right, then Xiaomi won't eat anymore. Amy nodded with a little disappointment. Then, she looked at Meg with a pitiful look, and asked, Father, will you find a beautiful but evil queen? I'm scared. Father, he said. He stroked her hair. As long as I is. Father, you're the best. A relieved smile appeared on Amy's face. Under Meg's caress, she fell asleep. Ugly Duckling snuggled into her arms. It found a comfortable position and also fell asleep. Little one, you have a lot to worry about. I didn't want to find a stepmother for you. Meg tucked the two little ones in with a smile. He bent down and kissed Amy's hair with a doting look on his face. He stood at the bedside and watched the two little ones sleep soundly for a while before returning to his desk to continue reading the documents. There was a lot of information, but most of it was about the customs of the elven race and some trivial matters. It was probably a pile of useless information left behind after the useful information had been filtered out. Some of it was even from more than a decade ago. However, Meg had obtained a top-secret information from it. He had already broken through. After all, not everyone knew about Sally. Perhaps he could slowly get the real information from Sally from the information. It was not that Meg didn't get anything. At least he could confirm one thing. Since 3 years ago, the elven princess had been in seclusion with the Tree of Life. She hadn't left the cave. No one had even seen her. Looks like she didn't have anything to do with that incident. The so-called seclusion is most likely a form of imprisonment with no freedom. Meg put all the information back into the bag. He opened the closet and put it into a safe. Then, he lay down on the bed. What kind of woman would she be? Meg thought to himself curiously. Amy's words today made him more determined to find her mother. No matter how good other people were, they were still not the same. After having a strange dream of being whipped the whole night, Meg was woken up by the alarm clock the next morning. He reached out to turn off the alarm clock. He took a look at Amy and Ugly Duckling, who were still sleeping soundly and struggling to hang on the edge of the bed. He got out of bed and put them back next to Amy's pillow. He didn't know how the two little ones slept. Every morning, Ugly Duckling would be kicked out of bed. Meow, Ugly Duckling meowed at Meg gratefully. Apart from Amy, the little one was close to him. Of course, this probably had something to do with the fact that he would give it all kinds of delicious food. Meg washed up and went downstairs. He had taken a day off yesterday because of a sudden mission from the system, so he was going to do a good business today. He was different from other idle bosses. He was very dedicated to his work. Rather than deriving pleasure from teasing his customers, he preferred to derive a sense of accomplishment from the satisfied expressions of his customers. Due to the fact that there was an additional dish on the menu, the time it took to prepare the ingredients had also been shortened. Thankfully, Meg's physical fitness had been improved, and the food he ate every day could be considered to be highly nutritious. Even if the system didn't restore his physical fitness, his body was still getting better every day. It nurtured his damaged veins and nourished his flesh that had been eroded by magic, and his strength was steadily increasing. At 6 a.m., Meg went upstairs to wake Amy up. She opened her eyes for a while, but immediately closed them again when she heard footsteps. She said softly, "I ate a poisoned apple. I need a kiss to wake her up." "Ah, my dear princess, your father is here to save you." Meg looked at the dramatic Amy, and quickly got into character. He walked over to the bed and bent down to gently kiss Amy's hair. Chapter 265. After breakfast, Meg packed up the food he brought for Crassus, and then pushed his bicycle out. Ugly Duckling hesitated for a long time between staying at home alone and getting carsick, but it still chose to get on the bicycle in the end. He didn't know why it was afraid of staying at home alone. When he locked the door, Meg took a look at the blacksmith shop in Mumbai, but it still wasn't open. The eerie silence made him feel inexplicably uneasy. After all, this was a neighbor who wanted to make big news. Didn't they say that the explosion was quiet at dawn? Meg was still a little worried since they were so close to each other. Because they had brought takeout, Meg and Amy went into the school together. The door to the magic lab on the 3rd floor was still ajar. Meg reached out to knock twice, and then pushed the door open to let Amy in. He also followed her in. "Good morning, little Amy." Crassus was holding a long-necked crystal container in his hand. There were red, blue, and white potions inside, and they didn't mix with each other. They were slowly entangled in Crassus' hand. "Wow, Master Crassus, what's this?" Amy looked at the crystal container in Crassus' hand with curiosity. Meg was also looking on with a curious expression. As a 10th-tier magic caster, the magic potions concocted by him had to be of the highest quality. It would be a good idea to give Amy a few high-grade magic shields. At the very least, they would be able to ensure her safety. "Open your eyes and don't miss it." Crassus smiled mysteriously. He suddenly shook the bottle, and the 3-colored potions began to swirl in the bottle. The 3 colors entangled together and rose from the thin bottle to form a 3-colored rose. It slowly rose from the bottle, and then was plucked by Crassus. He handed it to Amy with a smile, and said, "Little Amy, do you like it?" "Wow, Shirfu is so awesome. What a beautiful flower. Amy loves it so much." Amy reached out to take the tricolored flower with a happy smile on her face. Meg looked at the scene with a strange expression. He had thought that it was some kind of powerful spell, but he did not expect Crassus to spend so much time fiddling with it so early in the morning just to make a flower for Amy. It was really difficult for the famous close combat magician of the continent. It was indeed not easy to please a disciple. "Mr. Mac, did you bring me the braised chicken and sweet tofu pudding?" Crassus looked at Meg expectantly. "That's right. Braised chicken, rice, and tofu pudding." Meg nodded with a smile as he placed the bags on the table. "Master, it's a total of 1,050 copper coins." Amy held the flower in one hand, and extended her other hand with a smile as she said, "Amy also had a braised chicken, rice, and sweet tofu pudding this morning. It's also 1050 copper coins." "All right, I'll give it to you right away." Crassus couldn't help but laugh. Not only was he not filial to his disciple, but he was also responsible for her 3 meals every day. She and Julian were probably the only 2 masters on the entire Norland continent who were like this. Meg felt a little guilty that his child had to pay for her meals at home. He accepted the money from Crassus, and prepared to leave. "By the way, Mr. Mac, Amy's school ends at 4:30 tonight. I have something to do, so can you come and pick her up?" Crassus said as he carefully picked up his food. "All right, then I'll be off." Meg nodded. He patted Amy's hair, and turned to leave. There was no problem at all with him picking up his daughter from school. Crassus had asked him to bring Amy back because he was going to have dinner here. Meg rode his bicycle back to the restaurant, only to find that there were already a few customers lining up at the entrance. All of them greeted Meg warmly upon seeing him, and at the same time, they looked at his bicycle with amazement. This thing was really amazing, but it was clear that it wasn't something that could be ridden by just anyone. Meg greeted everyone with a smile. He opened the door for Yabamiya and Sally, who were also waiting at the entrance, to enter. Then, he closed the door again. "Ha! Why did that beautiful elf girl come in with him? Does she have some special privileges, a customer asked with confusion. Fairy. Could it be that she's the mistress of the shop that we've never seen before? The man beside him widened his eyes in surprise. Now that you mention it, that might be the case. I've eaten here many times, but I've never seen the boss's wife. How is that possible? Didn't you see that elf girl just now? She looks like she's only 17 or 18 years old. Little boss is already 4 years old, someone retorted. What's so strange about that? Elves look young to begin with. Even if a 300-year-old elf stands in front of you, it's normal for her to still look like a 17 or 18-year-old girl. Elves have a lifespan of 800 years, and elves who practice life magic can even maintain their youthful appearance without aging, the person who had spoken earlier said with a smile. Maybe she's Mr. Mac's new waitress. Didn't you see her standing with Miss Mia just now? If she's the boss's wife, how could she not have a key? Mr. Mac probably hasn't had enough kneeling on the washboard yet. All of the customers began to discuss Sally's identity, and all kinds of strange speculations popped up in their minds. Have a seat, Aisha. It's your first time working here, so don't be too nervous. It's okay to be a little slow, but try not to make any mistakes. Meg put down his bicycle, and looked at the dizzy ugly duckling in the basket with a smile. Boss, if you're making the braised chicken today, do you need me to help you with the turkey? Yabamiya asked Meg. Not today. I'm only using chicken drumsticks, so there's no need for extra processing. Meg shook his head. Mia really didn't know how to rest. All right. Yabamiya nodded with a slightly disappointed expression. Maybe we can learn spring is here again. Sally suggested in a soft voice. This dance was like a magic dance. Even though some of the movements were a little embarrassing to perform, it was also very captivating. She went back and practiced the dance for an entire night, and she was looking forward to the next dance even more. Can I? Yabamiya's eyes also lit up as he looked at Meg. Of course you can. Meg took out the music box with a smile. He clicked on the dance teaching mode and placed it on the table before going into the kitchen. Even if he was a capitalist, he had to be a virtuous capitalist. Did you hear? Something big happened at Amy's yesterday. What big thing? Didn't Mr. Mac take a leave of absence to collect materials? I'm looking forward to today's new product. That was the announcement in the morning. It was replaced with a new announcement yesterday afternoon. It said that the restaurant was attacked by thugs and razed to the ground. There was even a huge crater that was over 10 meters deep in the ground. What the fuck? Who would do such a crazy thing? Chapter 266. It was said that a golden dragon and a 10th-tier demon led a group of ferocious forest trolls to attack the restaurant. The scene was extremely tragic. Those who heard it were heartbroken, and those who saw it cried. The entire restaurant was gone in an instant, a little old man outside the restaurant said with a sigh. Hiss. That's terrifying. The customers in the long lines sucked in a breath of cold air and became nervous. Are Mr. Mac and Little Boss okay? Yes, what happened after that? What happened after that? The customers' curiosity was piqued, and they asked with concern. After that, you might not believe it, but Boss Mag rushed out of the ruins with the little boss in one hand and the cleaver in the other. After that, he engaged in a great battle with the giant dragons and demons. It was such a fierce battle that even the light of the sun was covered, the little old man said with emotion as he clicked his tongue. What happened after that? Is Mr. Mac okay? A little girl asked nervously. Of course. Boss Mag was so brave that he could take down the giant dragon and demon with just a cleaver. All the forest trolls were scared out of their wits and turned to run. Boss Mag caught up to them, and he ended their lives one by one. Poor Ching Ching, you're so pitiful. No one would have thought that the owner of this small restaurant was a dragon slayer. Who could fight him when he took out his knife? The little old man became more and more excited as he spoke. Even his beard was trembling as if he had seen the scene live. Carl, why aren't you telling stories under the stone statue of peace? Why are you here? This story is probably made up, right? Someone in the crowd suddenly said. A young man looked at the little old man with a smile. Hey! It really is the old storyteller under the statue. I was wondering why his voice sounded so familiar. I also like to listen to the old man tell all kinds of magical stories, but today's story doesn't seem right. Someone in the crowd quickly recognized the little old man, and they all spoke up. Carl had made quite a name for himself in the Aiden Square. He had begun to tell stories under the Stone of Peace more than 10 years ago. He didn't set the time, and he didn't charge anyone for it. It was all up to his mood, and one could only find him if they were lucky. Moreover, he never repeated his stories. Every time he told a new story, he would tell a new one. Moreover, each of his stories was very vivid and interesting, so he had a group of his own fans. They would wander around the stone statue from time to time. If they met Carl, they would be very lucky. They didn't expect to meet him here today, so they were naturally overjoyed. Stories come from real life, so naturally, they can't be exactly the same as real life. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a story. It's boring to line up, so I'm just trying to make everyone laugh. Carl didn't panic even though he was recognized. Everyone laughed when they heard that. Why don't you say another one? Your stories are really good, someone jeered. No. It's my principle to only tell one story a day, and it's also my principle to finish telling a story. If you tell me now, it will delay my meal. Carl shook his head and refused without hesitation. Everyone was a little disappointed when they heard that. After all, it was a little boring to line up here. Although the sweet and savory parties were divided into two groups, no one was in the mood to argue in the morning. Usually, after a day's work, the best time to conquer each other was at night. Everyone was in high spirits at that time. What do you guys think Mr. Mac will cook today? Someone asked curiously. I saw Mr. Mac riding his two-wheeled bicycle with the little owner at noon yesterday. He was carrying a turkey in his hand. Today's new dish will most likely be related to the turkey, a tall and thin man said. I love chicken soup. I'm looking forward to it, a little girl beside him said with anticipation. By the way, the Aiden Square food competition is starting again today. Did Mr. Mac participate? A young demon with a pair of horns standing at the back of the line chuckled and said, Yes, I did. I spent half an hour looking at the rankings board before I finally found the braised chicken. It's most likely the new dish today. However, Boss Mag seems to have split the sweet tofu pudding and the savory tofu pudding into two dishes to make up the numbers. Isn't that the same dish? How could it be the same dish? The sweet tofu pudding is heretical. How can the savory tofu pudding be eaten? It completely ruins the sweetness of the tofu pudding. Everyone's murderous gazes landed on that demon in unison, and the harmonious atmosphere suddenly became tense. Scary. I can't afford to offend him. That young demon lowered his head silently. He didn't expect that his casual remark would incite so much hostility. In my opinion, the top 4 spots on the food competition should be monopolized by Mamies. Of course, the savory tofu pudding can't be on the list. I don't have a problem with the top 4 spots being monopolized by Mamies, but the sweet tofu pudding shouldn't be on the list. In any case, I'm going to give the sweet tofu pudding a bad review later. Yeah, bad review. Humph. We'll give it a bad review too. It was early in the morning, but the atmosphere was already tense, and it looked as if a fight would break out at any moment. Sigh, this isn't very peaceful. Meg, who was just about to open the door, couldn't help but sigh when he heard the quarrel outside. These two parties were bickering and giving bad reviews, so he was the one who was hurt. It seemed that the so-called zero negative reviews was only a dream after all. It's time for business. Welcome, Meg said with a smile as he opened the door to the tense customers. Yaba Mia and Sally stood off to the side. Mia had a smile on her face, while Sally had a cold expression on her face. Harrison walked in, and a hint of amazement appeared on his face at the sight of Sally. He turned to Meg with a smile, and asked, "Mr. Mack, who is this?" "This is the restaurant's new waitress, Aisha," Meg introduced with a smile. "When it comes to waitresses, Mr. Mack, you're the only one I admire." Harrison gave Meg a heartfelt thumbs up. Yaba Mia, who was diligent, beautiful, and full of energy, was already enviable enough. Now, there was an elegant and cold elven waitress. Just the appearance of the waitress was enough to attract a lot of customers. This was cheating. "This braised chicken and rice is the new dish, right? Why is it so expensive?" "It's 800 copper coins, Mr. Mack. Is this a rooster that can lay eggs?" someone couldn't help but exclaim as he flipped open the menu. Chapter 267. 800 copper coins. That's enough for 4 bowls of tofu pudding. "It's a little expensive," a young woman said in a low voice. "That's right. The prices of the previous 2 dishes have been decreasing. I thought that the price of this new dish would be lower. I secretly saved 500 copper coins and prepared to try this new dish. I didn't expect that it wouldn't be enough at all." A young man in short combat attire sighed. "Mr. Mack's tricks aren't something normal people like us can understand. It's not that I don't want to spend 800 copper coins, but I should at least see if it's worth the price." Harrison pulled out a chair and sat down. This time, he wasn't in a hurry to order. The faint aroma of chicken soup wafted out of the kitchen, causing one's imagination to run wild. However, since it was 800 copper coins per serving, there were quite a few people who ordered other dishes. No one had ordered the braised chicken and rice yet. "Boss, I'll try the braised chicken and rice," Carl said to Meg as he pulled out a chair and sat down. "Sure, please wait a moment." Meg nodded with a smile. He nodded encouragingly at Sally and walked quickly to the kitchen. "Good luck, don't be nervous." "I'll help you," Yaba Mia said to Sally in a low voice. She smiled and began to help customers order. "Old Mr. Carl, you're really generous. 800 copper coins for a braised chicken and you ordered it just like that," Jimmy said as he looked at Carl. He was also a loyal fan of Carl's. His family owned a small shop, and his shop was right in front of the peace badge. He had grown up in the Aden Square, and he had always been fascinated by Carl's stories. Everyone was also looking at Carl with great interest. Those who wanted to order weren't in a hurry. After all, 800 copper coins was enough for a plate of Yangzhou fried rice and a bowl of tofu pudding. I have faith in Boss Mag's culinary skills. If he dares to bid 800 copper coins without any real skills, then he'll be ruining his own reputation, Carl said nonchalantly. He wasn't worried at all. You're right. Mr. Mack has never disappointed us. Jimmy nodded in agreement. However, he was still helping out at his family's restaurant and could only earn a few thousand yuan a month. He couldn't bear to order the braised chicken and rice that cost 800 yuan a plate. Meg wasn't in a hurry at all. After all, he could only make 3 pots of braised chicken and rice in the morning, and each pot had 16 servings. With how delicious the braised chicken was, it wouldn't be long before it was sold out. After all, Most customers who could afford a plate of Yangzhou fried rice at 600 copper coins wouldn't mind spending an extra 200 copper coins on a plate of braised chicken and rice. Most of them were just watching because they didn't want to waste their money. Everyone took their seats, and some of them started gossiping in low voices. Those who were bored could enjoy the beautiful gestures of Yabamiya and Sally when they served their guests. Now, the two parties had reached a tacit agreement to not bring their quarrel into the restaurant, and to try their best to finish it outside the restaurant. That way, everyone would feel more comfortable while eating. The customers who ordered the tofu pudding and rujiamos were quickly served. Many people ordered the tofu pudding and waited for Carl's braised chicken and rice to arrive. "George, do you think the braised chicken and rice will be delicious?" Harrison asked softly as he looked toward the kitchen. "Of course, I trust Mr. Mac's cooking. I heard that chicken soup is very nutritious, and Miranda's appetite and body have been getting better and better after eating Mr. Mac's Yangzhou fried rice. Her belly is also getting bigger and bigger, so I'm going to buy her some fire chicken to make chicken soup. If Mr. Mac's braised chicken and rice also has chicken soup, then I'll just buy it. If it's made by the cook at home, she'll probably stop eating it after a few bites." George nodded with a smile. "I'm so envious of the relationship between you two. I can't help but want to find a wife," Harrison said with a tinge of jealousy. He had only come out for a meal, but he was suddenly presented with a mouthful of dog food, and he couldn't refuse it. Just as they were talking, Yabamiya walked out of the kitchen with a tray in his hands. There was a brown casserole bowl and a bowl of rice on the tray, and he quickly made his way over to Carl's table. The rich aroma of the mushroom chicken soup wafted past everyone, and everyone's attention was immediately drawn to the bowl. "This chicken soup smells so good." "Yeah, the chicken soup I make at home isn't as fragrant, but I can still smell it. It's not just the chicken, there seems to be a special aroma in there as well. It's so intoxicating." Everyone couldn't help but gasp in amazement as they stared at the bowl of braised chicken and rice in Yabamiya's hands. "Here's your braised chicken and rice." Yabamiya walked over to Carl's table, and placed the braised chicken and rice on the tray in front of him with a smile. Carl's attention was completely drawn to the braised chicken in front of him. There was a layer of golden chicken cubes and all kinds of side dishes, and a spoonful of thick, golden red chicken soup. The rich and alluring aroma wafted toward him, and he couldn't help but close his eyes and take a deep breath. "Is this shiitake mushroom?" Carl's gaze was fixed on the shredded shiitake mushroom in the bowl, and he was a little surprised. Shiitake mushroom. All of the customers were perplexed. They clearly didn't know what it was. "Master Carl, what is this shiitake mushroom?" Jimmy asked curiously. Shiitake mushroom is a precious ingredient that can only be found by chance. It has a smooth texture, and it's delicious. I've only eaten it once in the wind forest, and I still can't forget that delicious taste to this day. After that, I asked a lot of people to purchase it from the elven race, but I was only able to buy one or two every once in a while. I could only tear off some of them and add them to the soup when I was boiling it, and I spent at least 100 gold coins on each one." Carl's eyes lit up as he looked into the bowl. He picked up a shredded shiitake with his chopsticks, and praised, "They were both sent here after being dried, but the quality is completely different from this one. Furthermore, this rich aroma is far superior to what I've had before. It's definitely the best." 100 gold coins. Everyone couldn't help but draw a sharp intake of breath upon hearing this. Just who was this Master Carl? How could he spend so much money and manpower just to eat a small shiitake mushroom? Of course, what was even more shocking to everyone was that Mr. Mac had just casually added the shredded shiitake mushroom into his new dish as a side dish, even though Carl had spent so much money to try it. This was a shiitake mushroom that cost over 100 gold coins. Even though the shiitake mushroom in the bowl had been shredded into thin strips, there couldn't be more than one. Furthermore, according to Master Carl, this thing was simply priceless, let alone a few bottles of it. Ordinary people couldn't even see it, let alone eat it. In the kitchen, Meg's lips curled up slightly as he listened to Carl's words. This was the first customer who had recognized the shiitake mushroom. It seemed like he was also a glutton. However, he didn't expect shiitake mushrooms to be so precious in this world. If that was the case, the price was set too low. Chapter 268. An alluring aroma wafted through the restaurant, and all of the customers couldn't help but stare at Carl as he put the shiitake mushroom into his mouth. This taste. Carl's eyes immediately lit up as he took a bite of the shiitake mushroom. The thick and delicious chicken broth seeped out of the shiitake mushroom, and a delicious taste blossomed in his mouth. This was the unique taste of the mellow chicken broth combined with the delicious mushroom aroma. His taste buds were almost instantly activated, and it was as if they were dancing on the tip of his tongue. Even though it's dried shiitake mushroom, it's not dry at all. It's soft and smooth, and the unique aroma of the shiitake mushroom surges straight into my head. This aroma doesn't ruin the rich taste of the chicken broth at all. Instead, it elevates the taste of the chicken broth to the extreme. The shiitake mushroom also becomes more flavorful after absorbing the rich chicken broth. They complement each other perfectly. Carl couldn't help but think to himself as he savored the taste of the shiitake mushroom. Compared to this, the shiitake mushroom I've eaten in the past is indeed far inferior. Mr. Mac really is a genius, both in terms of the quality and the cooking method. If he had released it earlier, I wouldn't have had to spend so much effort searching for shiitake mushrooms all these years. Carl praised from the bottom of his heart. He picked up his chopsticks and put another piece of shiitake mushroom into his mouth, chewing slowly with an expression of enjoyment. He then picked up his bowl of rice and ate 2 mouthfuls, and his expression became even more joyful. Gulp, the sound of saliva being swallowed instantly rang out in the restaurant. All of the customers were drooling as they watched Carl put a piece of chicken into his mouth with an expression of enjoyment. If it weren't for the fact that they knew that Carl had made a name for himself in the Aden Square over the past 10 years, the Peace Badge would soon be filled with people listening to his stories. Many people would even put gold and silver coins in front of him, but he never accepted them. Every time he finished telling a story, he would ask people to take back their money, and give the rest of the unclaimed money to the homeless children. A person like him who didn't care about money naturally wouldn't act as a prop for Mr. Mac. Of course, after seeing him eat a shiitake mushroom for over 100 gold coins, everyone understood one thing. It wasn't that he didn't care about money, it was just that those 10 gold coins weren't worth it for him to bend over. "Boss, give me a portion of braised chicken and rice." "I want one too." "I want one here too." The sound of people ordering rose and fell one after another. Meg's face also revealed a smile. The good thing about meeting professional foodies was that he didn't need to explain himself. He could let the customers know how awesome this dish was. As the dishes of braised chicken were brought out, the alluring aroma of chicken soup filled the entire restaurant, attracting even more customers to place their orders. "I'm sorry, sir, but the braised chicken takes a long time to cook. If you order now, you'll have to wait for half an hour. Are you sure you want to order?" After the 16 servings of braised chicken were served, Yabamiya smiled at a customer who wanted to order braised chicken. Waiting for half an hour for a delicacy is naturally worth it. "Go ahead and order." The customer laughed. "Can I pack a portion to take with me?" George asked as he looked at Yabamiya. There was already a half-eaten portion of braised chicken and rice in front of him. Even though there wasn't much chicken soup, he was sure that Miranda would love to eat it. Furthermore, he was feeling very warm and comfortable after eating it, and it was very nourishing. I'll have to ask boss about this. A hesitant look appeared on Yabamiya's face. Even though Meg didn't set a limit on the number of servings of braised chicken, with the speed at which they were ordering and Meg's cooking, there was no guarantee that the customers in the restaurant would be able to afford it. Take the braised chicken out. Only one portion per person. I hope your wife will like it. Meg smiled at George as he stood at the entrance. He had become familiar with George during this period of time, and he knew that George had 3 sons, and his wife was pregnant with a 6-month-old child. Thank you, Mr. Mack. I'm sure Miranda will like it very much, George said as he looked at Meg with a grateful expression. Not long ago, Miranda had no appetite, and would vomit everything she ate. She was so weak that it seemed like she would collapse at any moment, and that had been a source of worry for George. However, after eating Meg's Yangzhou fried rice, her appetite had completely recovered, and her health had also improved significantly. A few days ago, even the doctor had been surprised by her health, and had said that the child was developing very well, and that if she continued to maintain her health, she would be able to give birth without any problems. This was definitely good news for George. He had been most worried about Miranda's health, and Meg's appearance was like a savior who had saved them all. Meg returned to the kitchen with a smile on his face. George's sons were classmates with Amy, so he naturally couldn't be too stingy. Bill, 2 people, a demon called out. That'll be 10 gold coins. Sally said in a cold voice as she stepped forward and glanced at the 2 bowls and 2 Rigiamo bags on the table. Waitress, why don't you smile? Look at how beautiful Miss Mia is when she smiles. Only smiles can make people feel warmth and love. Come on, smile, the fierce-looking demon said earnestly as he stared at Sally. Here are the 10 gold coins. The other demon hurriedly placed 10 gold coins on the table, and dragged the demon toward the door as he whispered, You're crazy. How dare you flirt with a waitress? I don't want to be blacklisted with you. The demon's expression changed slightly upon hearing that, and he said with a serious expression, How is that flirting? It's a serious suggestion. Don't spout nonsense. Look at how wretched you are when you speak. How can you be so serious? Who are you calling vulgar? The 2 demons argued as they walked out of the door. Sally's gaze lingered on their backs for a while, and a bluish-purple light slowly faded from her hand. She put away the gold coins on the table, and suddenly remembered something. She hurriedly yelled at the 2 demons who were about to open the door, Stop right there. Ha! The customers looked at her in confusion, wondering how the 2 customers had offended this beautiful elf waitress who was as cold as an ice mountain. The 2 demons who were holding the doorknobs suddenly froze. They looked at each other, and their expressions fell. They turned around with bitter faces. The first demon looked at Sally with a smile that was uglier than crying, and said, Miss, I was wrong. Even if you didn't smile, I still felt infinite warmth and love. Please let us go, and don't be blacklisted. Chapter 269. Ha! The 2 demons looked at the blue ticket in Sally's hand, and their expressions became strange. The Aiden Square Aiden Square Aiden Square Aiden Square Aiden Square Aiden Square had a history of several decades. It was released once a month, and almost all of the powerful restaurants in the Aiden Square would participate in it. Today was the first day of this month's competition, and the first day of voting. Okay. The 2 demons nodded at almost the same time. Although they had mixed feelings, as long as they weren't on the blacklist, it was fine. They walked back, took the tickets, and sat down obediently. Looks like Mr. Mack is really going to make it to the top this time. It's a good thing to make it to the top, but I have mixed feelings. I'm afraid that such a good restaurant will be overlooked, and I'm also worried that the restaurant will be overcrowded by tourists who follow the rankings. Yeah. Usually, you have to wait for a long time to eat a meal, but you can eat it as long as you wait. I'm afraid you won't even be able to eat it in the future. When the guests saw this scene, they began to discuss softly with complicated expressions on their faces. Sally stood beside the table with a tray, and the two demons sat in front of the table with pens in their hands. They looked even more obedient than elementary school students. There were 5 dishes on each ticket, and the names and prices of the dishes were all written in beautiful handwriting in advance. The customers only needed to tick the dishes they wanted to eat at the back. The ratings for each dish were overall review, taste, environment, and service. Each dish was scored on a 5-point scale, with 5 points being very satisfied, 4 points being very satisfied, 3 points being satisfied, 2 points being average, and 1 point being extremely bad. In addition, they could also write a rating below each dish. Overall rating, 5 points. Taste, 5 points. Environment, 5 points. Service. The two demons looked up at Sally at the same time, and then emphasized, 5 points. Rating, very good. The two demons put down their pens at the same time, and looked at Sally with a dry smile. Is this okay? Yes. Sally glanced at the tickets in their hands, and nodded with satisfaction. Can we go now? The first demon asked again. Yes. Sally nodded. The two demons stood up and walked quickly to the door as if they had been pardoned. They didn't heave a sigh of relief until they were out of the door. Scary. It's all because you talk too much. Let's go, let's go. We still have to do a few more missions today. What about the service rating? You want to change it? The two of them turned back to look in the direction of the restaurant at the same time. They immediately shook their heads and quickly left. Sally stacked the bowls and chopsticks on the table and placed them on the tray. She then cast a small water magic spell on the table with her right hand, and the surface of the table immediately became so shiny that it looked like a mirror. It was much cleaner than when it was wiped with a rag, and the customers at the other 2 tables were stunned. Are you embarrassed to be a waiter without any special abilities now? The same thought flashed through everyone's mind. See, if you don't study hard, you won't even be able to be a waiter. A father tapped his son's head and warned him seriously. I got it. The little boy nodded his head in agreement and strengthened his determination to study hard. Sally glanced at the customers, and they immediately lowered their heads to eat. Strange, why do these people seem to be afraid of me? Am I not gentle enough? Sally carried the tray to the kitchen, and she was a little perplexed. In the past, she would never speak more than 3 words to a man, but today, she was doing her best to appear more amiable and friendly. Yabamiya came out of the kitchen with 2 bowls of braised chicken. When she passed by Sally, she gave her a thumbs up and an encouraging smile on her face. Sally nodded slightly as if she had regained her confidence. She quickened her pace and put the bowls and chopsticks into the dishwasher that she had learned how to use. This magical thing would automatically wash the bowls with a press of the button, and the bowls would be as clean as the ones she had washed with magic. She had said that she could use magic to wash the bowls and chopsticks, but this suggestion was rejected by Meg. He didn't want her to use too much magic power. Well done. Keep hugging. Meg looked at Sally and encouraged her with a smile. He didn't want to force Sally to keep smiling like Yabamiya. With her personality, it would be worse than death. It was fine as long as she didn't make the customers feel uncomfortable. Okay. Sally nodded. She felt that her body was full of energy, and her hands moved a little faster. When she heard that someone was paying the bill, she quickly walked out of the door. With Sally taking care of the bill and clearing the table, Yabamiya was a lot more at ease. She greeted all the customers with a smile and brought them a warm morning. Sally, who was collecting the bill, gave the customers a refreshing feeling. All of a sudden, they felt refreshed and cooperated with her to fill in the tickets. Mr. Mac's restaurant is definitely a 5-star restaurant, but I think it's necessary to point out the right direction for the future customers. Is the sweet tofu pudding suitable for human consumption? Sweet tofu pudding, 1 star. Extremely bad. After a customer finished writing his order for the savory tofu pudding and the braised chicken and rice, he looked at the sweet tofu pudding. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. He waved his pen and gave it 1 star. Fuck. How dare he give the sweet tofu pudding 1 star? What the hell is the savory tofu pudding? I want to give it 1 star too. 1 star it is. I'm not afraid. The savory party will win. We're the savory party who's not afraid of anyone. That customer's words were like a fuse that ignited the sweet and savory parties, who were at peace with each other. Both parties started to give each other 1 star. Sally looked at this scene and didn't know what to do. Although she also liked the sweet tofu pudding, Mr. Mac had just told them the importance of this competition. If they gave each other 1 star, it was very likely that both the sweet and savory tofu pudding would fail to make the rankings. Let's do as they wish. Meg suddenly appeared behind her and said softly. Although he was smiling, he was already cursing in his heart. Sure enough, the situation that he had expected happened. Fortunately, the system required 1 dish to be in the top 30 to complete the task. Rigiamo was the most popular dish in the restaurant every day. As long as it didn't affect the Rigiamo's ranking, it was fine. Okay. Sally nodded slightly. Hearing Meg's words, she immediately calmed down and continued to pay the bill and clear the table. Chapter 270. The woman was about 23 or 24 years old. She was very pretty, and her eyebrows were thin and curved. She looked very gentle. Her slightly curly brown hair was casually tied up in the middle with a black cloth. She was wearing a long white dress, and there were only a few patches of green grass at the waist and sleeves. She looked up at the man beside her with a smile, and it seemed that he was the only person in her golden eyes. The man called Lulu was a head taller than the woman, and looked to be about 30 years old. He had a square face, and was as muscular as a bear. His dark brown hair was cut short, and he was wearing a brown bearskin shirt. He was carrying an intricate bamboo basket on his back, and there seemed to be a lot of things in it. However, the basket was so tightly woven that it was impossible to see what was in it. The man looked down at the woman beside him, and his golden eyes were also filled with love. He reached out with a big hand to brush away a strand of hair that was hanging in front of the woman's forehead. He shook his head with a smile, and said, "Cece, although Chaos City has the best security on the Norland continent, those people could still follow us here, so we can't let our guard down." "I see. Those people are so annoying." Cece's expression became a little dejected. "It's okay. You can focus on eating. I'll be right behind you to protect you no matter what." Lulu reached out with a big hand, and gently placed it on Cece's head. Her movements were a little clumsy, but she couldn't hide the love in her eyes. I knew Lulu was the best. Let's go eat." A radiant smile immediately appeared on Cece's face. She rubbed her head against Lulu's big hand, and walked in front happily. Lulu looked around, and the good-natured expression on her face became serious. Then, she strode behind Cece. "Bill, please." Carl put down the spoon in his hand, and finished 2 bowls of rice and a big bowl of braised chicken. He burped with satisfaction. "That's 8 gold coins," Sally said coldly as she walked over. "It was worth it." Carl pulled out a dragon coin and handed it to Sally. He then accepted the 2 gold coins that he had given back, and made his way to the entrance of the kitchen. He turned to Mag with a curious expression and asked, "Boss Mag, where did you get so many shiitake mushrooms? Can you tell this old man about it?" "Sorry, I really can't say that." He smiled and shook his head. How could he say that? Could it be that the system planted them in the wind forest? The elf race's army would probably arrive tomorrow. I'm just curious. Anyway, only Mr. Mac can make shiitake mushrooms so delicious in this world. The old man can't make them himself. Carl was still unwilling to give up. I'm sorry. Meg still smiled and shook his head. All right, but Mr. Mac is such a nice businessman. He put 4 or 5 shiitake mushrooms in his braised chicken, and he only charged 800 copper coins for it. That's way too cheap. Carl couldn't help but sigh as he turned around and walked out of the restaurant. Meg withdrew his gaze and continued to cook. He was in a good mood as he listened to the praises coming from outside. The 48 braised chicken plates were quickly ordered. Even though they had to wait for an hour, many customers still chose to order a plate and wait. This was nothing compared to missing out on delicious food. After the morning opening hours, Meg rotated his sore wrists. Although his physical fitness had improved a lot, he had to cook 2 pots of Yangzhou fried rice, braised chicken, 100 rujiamos, and 200 servings of tofu pudding all by himself in an hour and a half. Meg already felt that he was Superman. After a whole morning of work, Sally had become more and more familiar with the cashier's job. Her cold service style was also recognized by the customers. According to Meg's careful observation, the customers who appeared to be trembling in fear were probably secretly delighted. In other words, she was the legendary masochist. Of course, most of the customers were normal. After all, although Sally gave people the impression that she was a little cold, she still spoke and acted elegantly, and the customers felt comfortable with an appropriate distance from her. With Sally's addition, the restaurant's operation became a little easier. Meg also saw a lot of room for improvement, which was what he cared about the most. After all, as the number of dishes in the restaurant increased, so did the number of customers. It would only get busier and busier in the future. This was the time to test the ability of the waitresses. Meg didn't plan to hire too many waitresses, as that would make the restaurant too noisy. It would be best if 2 waitresses could handle the current situation. 2 waitresses each had their own strengths, and they were the most suitable for the current restaurant. "Boss, Mia, I'll go back first. I'll come back in the afternoon." Sally cleaned the restaurant with water magic, and left after saying goodbye. Meg knew that Sally was working 2 jobs. Meg didn't know what to say about a noble lady like her being reduced to working as a waitress in a restaurant and a cleaner in a small hotel. After all, with this lady's ability, she could go to the Chaos Guild and accept some missions, and the reward she would receive would be far greater than the salary of these 2 jobs. However, Sally's identity had to be kept a secret. If she went to the Chaos Guild, her real identity might be exposed. Therefore, she chose to work as a waitress in the restaurant so that she could eat the delicious food in the restaurant for all 3 meals. "Mia, you should take a break too." Meg took off his apron and hung it off to the side. Ever since Sally took over the cleaning of the restaurant, Yabamiya's workload had decreased significantly, and she had nothing to do after the closing hours. Yabamiya shook her head and said, "No need, boss. Let me give you a massage. Aisha did a lot today, and I'm not tired at all." "Sure." Meg nodded, and pulled out a chair for himself. Yabamiya wasn't someone who could sit still anyway, and his shoulders and arms were indeed a little sore. In the center of the Aiden Square, in front of a magic screen, the employees of the Aiden Square Catering Association were busy counting the tickets they had received in the morning. The Aiden Square food rankings were updated once a day, and the current rankings were based on the previous month's rankings. If there weren't any dark horse restaurants, the rankings wouldn't change too much, and that would greatly reduce the workload of the employees. Luther, what rank do you think the restaurant we went to yesterday will rank tomorrow? Alvin asked softly as he helped Luther move the table. There are a total of 341 restaurants participating in this month's Aiden Square Food Rankings competition. I think it'll rank 340, Luther said with a smile. Why not rank 341? Alvin asked with a perplexed expression. Didn't a restaurant sign up yesterday before it even opened? The owner said that it was only going to appear on the rankings as an advertisement, so it shouldn't lose to a restaurant that hasn't even opened yet, right? Luther chuckled. Chapter 271. 5 tables were arranged in a row in front of the magic screen, and there was a ballot box in front of each table. Staff members of the Catering Association in red vests were collecting and registering the votes. All of the votes had to be checked on a crystal bowl. Those that emitted a green light were counted, while those that emitted a red light were discarded. Look at this restaurant. Why are the prices so high? Tofu pudding costs 200 copper coins per helping. Rujiamo costs 300 copper coins per helping. That Yangzhou fried rice costs 600 copper coins. The most expensive dish, the braised chicken, costs 800 copper coins. A short-haired young man among the staff members exclaimed. He held a ticket in his hand, and an incredulous expression appeared on his face as he said, "A customer spent 1,000 copper coins for breakfast." Ha! Isn't this that restaurant? There's a customer so early in the morning. Luther and Alvin, who had just set down their tables, were both surprised. In my opinion, the boss was probably worried that the ticket would be too ugly, so he asked his staff to send one secretly. Who would spend 1,000 copper coins to eat breakfast in a restaurant in the corner early in the morning? However, the way we count the votes is that each person can cast one valid vote per day. Who knows, he might even get 10 votes in the end. Alvin curled his lips, expressing his disdain for such behavior. I thought that only the big restaurants would cheat, but I didn't think that this small restaurant would do the same. The amount of money spent on a ticket accounts for 30% of the total score, so his 10 tickets are worth more than 100 tickets from other restaurants. If you ask me, we should have changed the ranking system a long time ago. More and more customers are beginning to question our fairness. Luther shook his head with an annoyed expression. Sho, keep your voice down. Do you think low-level employees like us have the final say in this? Even though our catering association belongs to the city lord's castle, the restaurants of the Chamber of Commerce are still the ones that pay the most money every month. Let's just turn a blind eye to this kind of thing. Alvin shushed them before looking around with a nervous expression. I know that, but I've worked here for more than 20 years. The ranking list when I was young was not like this. The restaurant ranking list was chosen by the customers themselves, and it was widely praised. Ever since the family Moreton took complete control of the Aden Chamber of Commerce, everything has changed. They're just using us as tools. Luther sighed. He was both annoyed and helpless. Is it that restaurant called Mamie? I have one here as well, and it costs 1,300 copper coins. Right at this moment, another ticket inspector spoke out. There's another one. Luther and Alvin were surprised and even angrier. I still have 3. They cost 500 copper coins, 1,000 copper coins, and 1,100 copper coins respectively. I also have a 200 copper coin note. There are 2 more here. All of the ticket inspectors exclaimed in surprise. It wasn't uncommon to see expensive dishes in the Aden Square, but such a high-end dish that cost several hundred copper coins was usually only seen in high-end restaurants. Such a small and unknown restaurant actually set such a high price and sold so many servings during breakfast time. This was simply impossible in everyone's knowledge. Even at Dukas restaurant, no one would order a whole roast lamb that cost 2,500 copper coins so early in the morning, although the main reason was that the restaurant didn't serve roast lambs in the morning. This is the first time this restaurant is participating in the ranking competition, right? Could it be that they're the dark horse of this competition? Even a dark horse can't be this greedy. Judging from the order, the braised chicken that costs 800 copper coins isn't enough. If they ordered 3 servings, they could go to Dukas restaurant and eat a whole roast lamb. Exactly. I think there's something wrong with this restaurant. Did they falsify the price of their dishes? All of the ticket inspectors began to discuss spiritedly. One of them took out a notebook and flipped through it for a while. He pointed to the last restaurant on the list and said, if they didn't make a mistake when they signed up, the price of their dishes is exactly the same as the one on the list. Everyone fell silent upon hearing this. They all turned to the thin middle-aged man standing off to the side, and one of them said, "Vice President, what do you think we should do? Don't jump to conclusions just yet. As long as the tickets can pass the magic balls inspection, they will be recorded in the book. Count how many customers spent in the morning and the total amount. I will personally go to that restaurant to take a look at it in the afternoon. If they really did violate the rules, then they must be disqualified from the competition and banned from the rankings forever." Robert gestured for everyone to calm down. Vice President Robert was transferred here from the City Lord's Castle last year, and he's been working hard to rectify the chaos in the ranking competition. Unfortunately, he can't do anything on his own, and his words don't count in the association. Now, all he can do is keep an eye on the ticket inspectors. If there were more officials like him, our association wouldn't have fallen to such a state. Luther looked at the solemn Robert with both respect and pity in his eyes. "I think there's definitely something wrong with that restaurant. With Master Robert here, we can't let them do as they please." Alvin clenched his fists. "All right." Everyone nodded, and continued to inspect the tickets. The tickets for Amy's were all placed to the side, and soon, everyone had a few dozen tickets in their hands. "Vice President, there are 320 tickets in total, and the total cost is 150,400 copper coins." Everyone gathered all the tickets together, and the old accountant with over 30 years of experience in inspecting tickets announced in a shocked voice. Everyone fell silent upon hearing this, and their expressions were one of shock and fury. Even the most popular breakfast restaurant in the Aden Square wouldn't be able to earn 150,000 copper coins from breakfast. Furthermore, this amount of money had come from an unknown restaurant. No one present would believe that this was normal. This guy is too arrogant. He has no regard for the rules at all. "Yeah, Vice President, I don't think there's even a need to investigate this. Just disqualify him from the ranking competition and put him on the blacklist forever." The silence lasted for a long while, and someone finally spoke up with an agitated expression. "Give me the information on this restaurant. Don't be in a hurry to come to a conclusion. I'll make a decision after I do some field research." Robert was also quite surprised, but he also didn't rush to a conclusion. 150,000 copper coins in revenue was enough to push this restaurant into the top 100, even if the number of votes was very low. If they could maintain this level of revenue in the afternoon and evening, then it wouldn't be difficult for them to squeeze into the top 50. "All right, all the information is here. According to the information submitted by our inspectors, this restaurant has been open for less than a month." The old accountant handed over the information in his hand to Robert. "Amy's, the westernmost part of the Aden Square." Robert carefully looked through the information for a while before putting down his hand and looking into the distance with tightly furrowed brows. If this mess wasn't eradicated, then the restaurant association would lose all credibility sooner or later. Meg was completely oblivious to what was happening in the square. Only 300 or so tickets had been distributed in the morning, and he was a little worried that he wouldn't be able to make it onto the ranking competition. In particular, the sweet and savory factions were fighting each other, and he couldn't be bothered to think about those two spots. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.